Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. I've been talking to someone in the night. At first it was weird, but now I'm genuinely horrified. Everything started 2 months ago. In January, I moved to a new house in Port Arthur. I had recently divorced from my husband after a 6-year marriage, and I wanted to live somewhere I could be free. I also brought with me my golden retriever, Milo. At that time, he was almost 2 years old. When I first saw the house, I was instantly amazed. It was beautiful. The garden was big, filled with green grass. Especially Milo was happy, and I immediately contacted the landlord and told him it was sold. The first night in my new house was perfect. When I lay on my bed, it felt like euphoria was bubbling inside my body. I felt so cozy, safe, and free in my covers, all at the same time. Those were the only nights I felt safe, though. On the 4th night, I woke up to some strange growling sounds. It sounded like a baby kitten that was being beaten to death, combined with some gurgling and thuds. I woke up and checked the clock. It was 3:55. Milo was next to me in bed, and he was shivering and whimpering, which was strange because he had never acted like this before. There was no reason he should acted this way. Oh boy, I was so wrong. Because that was when I started actually hearing the growling sounds. It felt like it was coming from the room next to me, yet I couldn't build up the courage to stand up and walk over there. I decided that the growling sounds could be the neighbors, and calmed myself down to sleep again. At almost 5, the growling sounds finally stopped. This continued for almost a month, when one night something scary happened. I woke up to thudding sounds, and this time there was no growling. I looked beside me for Milo, but he wasn't there. In fact, the spot next to me was completely empty but warm, which meant that Milo was here but had just left. "Milo!" I yelled repeatedly. I finally got out of bed and stood up. I slowly walked down the corridor, and it was completely pitch black. On my 4th step, I saw a pair of yellow eyes in the dark. It felt like it was the only source of light, and it illuminated the dark room. I was so scared that I couldn't even scream. I had no idea what I was supposed to do at the moment. "Milo, is that you?" I reached out slowly and hoped that I would touch that furry, cute little dog that he was. Then another pair of yellow eyes appeared in the dark. This time I actually screamed. I ran to my room, gasping for air, and lo and behold, Milo was sitting at the door of my room, but his hair was all soaking wet, and he was again shivering vigorously. I slammed the door behind me. My worries of the yellow eyes started to fade. All I worried about right now was Milo and what happened to him. "Milo!" I exclaimed, scared. I found out his whole body was covered in blood. It was like someone had grabbed him and dunked him in a pot of blood, let him stand in the cold rain while some of it washed off, then told him to come back to me. Milo was still whining and whimpering, possibly from the cold, so I decided to wash him up. When I was washing him, I could feel something's presence looming over me. When I was bathing him, I felt someone watching. When I was combing his fur, I felt someone watching. When I dried him, I felt someone watching. Finally, when I was done with Milo, it was dawn. I hadn't gotten a good night's sleep, so I went straight to bed again. When I woke up, it was in the middle of the night again. Somehow, I had slept from dawn to the next night. Was this possible? I wasn't a very deep sleeper. And then it hit me. What if I hadn't slept for so long? In fact, Milo's incident was just a dream. I had always had crazy dreams, but this dream felt too realistic to believe. I looked to the spot beside me on my bed, and there Milo was, all cozied up and sleeping. I couldn't understand anything that was happening to me. I felt scared and unsafe. At this point, I just fell asleep again. This time, I woke up during the afternoon. I went out of bed to make a coffee for myself, and Milo came along with me. Everything seemed great. Only the nighttime was when weird things happens. I was scrolling on Instagram when I found this app that allows you to track your sleep and record anything that you say or do in the middle of the night. That night, I set the app up after having dinner. I ate a fulfilling meal at McDonald's and went straight to bed after I placed my phone in the bedside table and went to sleep. That night, I slept soundly. My first time in a month. When I woke up, it was morning and I was feeling as happy as a goose. I checked my sleep tracker. I had slept for 8 hours straight, and it said, "Well done" on the app. I played the recordings that was recorded during the night. What it recorded shocked me. In the middle of the night, I could hear sounds of muffled rustling, like someone was looking through my drawers. That was shocking, but not the scariest part. The scariest part was I heard my own voice asking, "What are you doing?" and a deep male voice that said, "Nothing." After that short conversation, the rustling disappeared, and everything was silent. How was this possible? I lived in the house by myself, and I was sure of it. I could recognize my own voice, although I do not recall saying anything in the middle of the night. And who was that deep male voice? Could my ex have sneaked in? He did not know any details related to my address, so I was unsure of that. The following night, Weird Conversations was recorded again. I heard rustling again from the recordings, then my voice saying, "Go away, please," and a deep male voice again saying, "Why?" After that, it was silent again. Today, I have moved away from the house because of my frightening encounters with these weird experiences. I no longer have sleeping problems, and I don't see or hear voices in the dark anymore. Although I am probably safe now, I still am very curious. Who or what was haunting me in the other house? Why? I will never forget my experience in the other house, and one day I will find you, the person who haunted me. My kidnapper released me 2 days ago. I've been free for exactly 2 days, 12 hours, and 17 minutes. Not that I'm counting. Actually, that's a lie. I am counting. Every second feels like a miracle and a nightmare simultaneously. Every tick of freedom is weighed down by what I know and what I can't bring myself to tell anyone. 3 years. That's how long I was held in that basement. At least, that's what they are estimating at the hospital due to my blood work. Time blurred together in that windowless room, marked only by the steady drip of a leaking pipe and his footsteps on the stairs. That drip. That goddamn drip. Sometimes I would lie awake counting them until I reached thousands, feeling my sanity slip away with each watery pulse. I don't remember who I was before. Not anymore. The worst part is knowing that I used to remember. For the first few months of captivity, I clung to my identity like a lifeline. I had a name. I had a home. I had people who loved me. I had a life. But he couldn't stand it when I'd recite these facts to myself in the dark. He'd fly into rages when I'd whisper my real name over and over like a prayer. "You're no one," he'd scream, bringing his fists down on my head, my face, my temples. "You're mine now, nothing else." The doctors at the hospital believe I have severe brain damage from repeated trauma. Scans show old fractures in my skull that healed without medical attention. Dark patches on my brain where blood pooled and scarred. Memory centers, damage beyond repair. Now the police ask questions I can't answer. Did I have family, friends, a job, a home? The only clear memory I have from before is standing outside a Trader Joe's, nearly dropping a paper bag of groceries as one of the handles ripped. It was raining lightly. I remember thinking I should have brought an umbrella. Then a hand clamped over my mouth, a bag over my head, the smell of chemicals, darkness. When I woke up, I was in that room. Concrete walls stained with substances I tried not to identify. A thin mattress on the floor that reeked of mold and worse things. A bucket in the corner that had empty only when the stench became unbearable even to him. A single light bulb hanging from the ceiling that he would turn on and off at random intervals, destroying any sense of day or night I might have clung to. The first month I screamed until my vocal cords shredded. I clawed at the door until my fingernails tore off, leaving bloody streaks on the wood. I begged whatever God might be listening to either save me or kill me. Neither happened. He never told me his name. I never saw his face clearly. At least, for the longest time, I didn't see his face. Not that finally seeing it helped. I'll explain soon. He always wore a mask when he came down. A plain white medical mask at first. Then more elaborate ones as time went on. Sometimes animals, sometimes cartoon characters. The Mickey Mouse one was the worst. He'd wear it on days he decided I needed to be disciplined. I won't describe what that entailed. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It was painful, horrific. That cheerful mouse face watching as he told me I was his masterpiece, a true blank canvas. That humans should be grateful for lives that are full of endless opportunities. Once, he didn't feed me for 2 weeks. Just water. By the end, I was hallucinating, seeing shadows dance on the walls. When he finally came down with a plate of cold spaghetti, I wept with gratitude. I kissed his feet. I would have done anything. I did do anything. The strangest part was how routine it all became. The terror never fully subsided, but it evolved into something duller, more manageable. Sometimes he'd bring me books, dog-eared paperbacks with coffee stains and torn covers. Sometimes he'd sit in a folding chair and make me read to him, correcting my pronunciation instantly when I stumbled over words. Sometimes he'd leave a small radio that only picked up static and religious broadcasts. The preacher's voices became as familiar as my own thoughts. When winter came, I could tell from the bone-deep chill that seeped through the concrete. He'd bring down a space heater sometimes, but only if I'd been good. I learned to stop shivering in his presence because it annoyed him. I learned to regulate my body temperature through sheer will. I learned things about survival that no human should know. I stopped asking why. I stopped begging to be released. I stopped speaking altogether around the 2-year mark. What was the point? The silence became my armor. He hated it. He'd scream at me, shake me, try anything to make me talk. But I'd retreated so far inside myself by then that my body was just an empty shell. Sometimes I would watch him from somewhere above, like I was floating near the ceiling, observing this broken girl with matted hair and skin stretched tight over protruding bones. The worst times were when he was kind. When he'd bring me a warm blanket, when he'd clean the infected cuts on my legs with surprising gentleness, when he'd read to me as I drifted off to sleep. Those moments confused me, made me question everything. Stockholm Syndrome. The hospital psychologist called it later. I call it hell. Then 2 days ago, he came down the stairs without his usual measured steps. He was rushing, frantic. No mask this time. In his face, I know he wasn't wearing a mask. It was human skin, but no eyes, no mouth or hair, no ears or nose. No features at all. Just a blank canvas. That's all I remember about his face. "Time to go," he said, injecting something into my arm before I could react. As consciousness slipped away, I heard the basement door open again, shuffling, a muffled cry. Another person. "Your replacement has arrived," he whispered in my ear. I woke up on a park bench 20 miles from the house where I'd been held. My hospital bracelet says Jane Doe. The police have been kind but frustrated by my inability to provide details. I can't describe his face even though I finally saw it. But I remember his voice. The way it would soften when he was about to hurt me. The slight lisp on certain words. The wet sound of his mouth when he'd lean close to whisper things he planned to do to me. It's strange how my brain protected some memories while obliterating others. The neurologist explained that severe, repeated head trauma can create a patchwork of memory loss. Your brain sacrificed your identity to preserve your survival instincts, she told me. Sometimes I still feel the phantom pain of those blows, the ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop for days, the world tilting as I tried to hold on to who I was before everything went dark. And last night, as a nurse was checking my vitals, I heard a news report on the small television in my hospital room. A 19-year-old girl had gone missing outside a Trader Joe's, 1 town over from where we are now. I should tell the police everything I know. I should help them find her. I should be doing something, anything. But I can't. I physically can't. Because as he was preparing to release me after I'd heard those muffled cries from upstairs, unmistakably female, young, terrified, he grabbed my face with one gloved hand, squeezing until I thought my jaw would break. "Listen carefully," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "You're going to leave here. You're going to stay quiet. If I see one police sketch, if I hear one whisper that you're helping them find me, I will cut her throat while playing a recording of your voice. Shell died believing you killed her." He showed me a phone then, replaying snippets of my voice he'd recorded over the years. My pleas, my screams, even my reading voice, from those bizarre sessions where he'd make me read aloud from classic novels for hours until my throat was raw. "I've already told her all about you," he continued. "How you helped pick her, how you're my partner. She thinks you've just gone out for supplies." His tone was nothing less than excited. "She's waiting for you to come back, for 3 years just like you waited." But here's the thing that keeps me frozen, the thing I haven't told anyone until now. When he released me, he whispered something else. "You did so well, I'll be coming back for you. This is just intermission. And remember, her blood will be on your hands if you talk." And on my discharge papers from the hospital, tucked into the folder the nurse gave me this morning, I found a small note on Mickey Mouse stationery. "Miss you already. The new girl isn't nearly as much fun. She keeps asking when you're coming back. I told her you'd return soon to help me with her. Tick-tock. Along with the note was a small USB drive. When I plugged it in at a library far from the hospital, it contained only a single video file. 10 seconds of footage showing a young woman, blindfolded and gagged, huddled in the same corner of the same basement where I spent 3 years. A timestamp on the video showed it was recorded just 4 hours ago. In the background, my voice, pieces of recording stitched together saying, "Don't worry, I'll be back soon. We're going to have so much fun together." I'd been free for exactly 2 days, 12 hours, and 23 minutes. But I know I'm still not free at all, and neither is she. My family is cursed with a genie who grants a single wish. The women in my family, there are only ever women's, are cursed. No one knows when it started, but the story is a distant ancestor, perhaps driven to desperation, trapped a genie in a bottle until it agreed to give her and the all women of her line endless wishes. The wish was granted in a way, but genies are masters at loopholes. Her lineage would have endless wishes, on, forever. But the individual women, we all die after the first one. From the moment we can talk, we're taught never to use the phrase, "I wish." My own mother was brutal about this. She pricked my tongue with needles and washed my mouth with soap. Once she even threatened to glue my lips together. It was cruel, but the lesson stuck. We have a sort of guidebook we've passed down for generations, with all the rules and wishes back and back and back, some of them in languages no one speaks anymore. The book can't be lost. It will always find its way back to the current wish holder. An ancestor wished for that. We don't have to worry about money. The world can go to hell and well be just fine. We don't have to worry about our health. We never get sick, ever, at least until after the wish. You have to live long enough to use it, to be in your right mind when you use it. No waiting for dementia or a bad flu to take you out. Once, a long time ago, someone wished for immortality, a nightmare. Her daughter had to use her wish to kill her miserable mother, cancer-ridden, desiccated, organs failing, loose skin hanging on a brittle skeleton. The next day, the daughter died in a freak drowning accident. And the next daughter is how we learned you can wish for a genie to kill itself. Some of the wishes recorded in the book are innocuous, made by people who saw no reason to fight the inevitable, like the ancestor who asked for a perfect slice of baklava with a cup of tea. Some were altruistic, like the ancestor who wished for her best friend to have a long, happy life surrounded by her children and grandchildren. And some were from ancestors who refused to go without a fight, such as the one who wished for the jinn to never be able to return home. Every day I prepare a platter of tea and sweets. The book says to treat the genie as a guest each visit, that even jinn must respect the ancient rites of guest host culture, which means she, the genie, prefers to take a female form. He can't harm me when she's there. She's polite, almost against her will, and it bothers her. At least she can't break into the house, or physically force us outside of it. 2 more wishes. I've used my good health and limitless funds to study extensively. I have multiple doctorates in linguistics, philosophy, and folklore. I have a law degree specializing in diplomacy from one of the best schools in the world. A culinary degree too, with a focus in pastry. All of that for my magnum opus. The only inheritance worth leaving my own daughter, who's sleeping upstairs as I write this, and a long life free of worry about the wish. Maybe even one where she'll die of natural causes. I have a pot of tea waiting. Rose hips and raspberry at the genie's request, with a jar of honey from her favorite tree 6,000 miles away. The old-fashioned sugar that comes in a cone and reminds her of how things used to taste. Pistachio cardamom biscuits topped with saffron that I've prepared from scratch. When she visits, I'll invite her in. Say how happy I am to receive her as a guest. Offer her tea and shower her with compliments, playing the part of an ingratiating host. She'll respond in kind, with all the appropriate words and phrases and a predatory smile with 2 sharp teeth. At some point, she'll offer me a gift, to repay me with some kind of favor, and I will simply murmur, "Your company is enough. You are my guest." The only thing is, she visits more often now, sometimes several times a day, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes barely an hour after she's left. I'm so tired. But I want my daughter to have a life to have all her own, and to do that I must never set her free. I got gifted this life-sized angel statue. I woke up to find the pedestal empty. I grew up in a family of collectors. It's a rather strange profession, but I consider myself an artistic person, and living among antiques has shaped my life in a unique way. I built my career around it, and now my time is spent on various activities such as research, authentication, finding pieces at auctions, estate sales, flea markets, antique shops, or through private collectors. I also do a bit of restoration work, and I assess the market value of antiques based on rarity, condition, provenance, history of ownership, and demand. It feels like a game of hunting down rare pieces and selling them to the right person, and I can't really describe the rush of getting your hands on something that everyone's after. It's thrilling, really. I know you'll say it's not viable. You don't make real money out of it. You'd be surprised. If you've done this for a long time, like my family has, a single sale can set you up for a few years. Get there before anyone else and organize an auction. And if you're lucky, you're set for life. I network with the richest and most pretentious families on an international level, and I love my job. After my parents died, I took over their 18th century mansion and did a bit of restoration and remodeling to get the authentic Victorian look. My house is old and so diverse. I have 3 studios where I keep my current works in progress, and the foyer and hallways are filled with paintings. I often host game nights and have friends over novice antique enthusiasts. Such game night happened last month. I had a few people over in the game room upstairs for some wine and gin, and beer and vodka and rum and more. We were on the 2nd floor, and one of my friends, Walt, stumbled into the hallway, took a drunken look at the arched window at the end of it, then turned to me. "You know, that ficus over these doesn't do the window justice. You need something more grand to fill up all that space." I followed his pointed finger and stared at the plant, bathed in moonlight. It's a long hallway, and the ending is underwhelming. A statue or something would work better. Ficus. He'd spit it out like an insult. Feels lazy. Trust me, I'll get you something better. What, you gonna get me a statue for my birthday? Yeah, why not? You should trust me. I know my way around antiques, unlike other amateurs. He smirked at me. Sure, why not? I replied, tilting my head and still staring at the poor ficus plant. A week passed, and I'd forgotten all about that when I got a call from Walt. He asked me if I was home and said his present was ready for me. I told him he could come, and in a few hours there he was, with 2 other guys in a truck. Sometimes I hated having eccentric friends. Some people give you an Amazon gift card. He shows up with a fucking statue in my driveway. He unwrapped it, and I didn't exactly know what to say. Should I thank him for this? I won't lie, it felt too much, even for me. Judging on the tall, elongated figure and the solemn, sorrowful face of the angel, the detailed clothes and wings, it was sculpted in a Gothic style. It was beautiful, but I felt like it didn't fit. It would fit in a cemetery or a forest, not at the end of my hallway, especially at night. I was unsure, very unsure, but some voice in my head encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone. I kept thinking about the Donna Tartt quote, "Beauty is terror. Whatever we call beautiful, we quiver before it." What do you think? It's beautiful, right? You seem unsure. No, it's just, I was expecting a more Baroque look, but it's fine. Great, I'll have the guys move it inside. For the next few days, I had to get used to going up the stairs and seeing the angel statue in all its glory. At the end of the hallway, crowned by a halo of sun rays and frozen in a mournful look, clothes windswept, wings half stretched. I avoided going up there at night or turning my back on it. I know, that was kid-like behavior, but I just needed some time to accommodate. I guess it was the most human-like thing I owned. I had other statues, sure, but not as real as this one. I admired the artist who had sculpted it. Accuracy is one thing, but you rarely find a piece that has a human feeling attached to it, that moves something inside you. Even if that something is fear, I was a little fascinated by it, and by the uneasiness it gave me, the feeling of it actually looking at me, seeing me. The feeling followed me as I showered, slept, worked. I didn't know whether to feel as if it was watching over me or just watching me in general. One time, a powerful thunderstorm rattled my home. I was afraid the top window would shatter, so I went upstairs to watch over it, as if I could stop it. I wasn't paranoid enough to check if the statue moved. I knew, it's just a statue. I sat on the carpet for a while, just staring, until I noticed the storm growing weaker, so I went downstairs into the kitchen. At one point, I heard loud thuds coming from upstairs. My first thought was, oh shit, the window broke and now it's raining inside. I hurried to the hallway, and as I was going up the stairs, my stomach tensed up. The The thuds had stopped. The rain hadn't. When anything happens, the reflex is to attribute it to something rational. The way you'd think the noise outside is an animal, not an intruder. The way you'd believe the knocking on the window is a tree branch, not someone. The way you'd assume the thuds upstairs are from the rain, and not from someone running across the hallway. Even if it sounded more like that. I made up the courage to climb an extra step, so that I could peek into the hallway. The angel statue stood at the end of it, proud and solemn on the pedestal, watching over me. I ignored the knot in my throat and went downstairs. I texted a friend about it and then put on some show to calm down. I had a big fair to attend in the morning, and I needed to rest. The night was uneventful. However, then I woke up. I found my front door unlocked and opened. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. Someone had broken in. They could have stolen thousands of dollars worth of pieces. Hell, they could still be inside. I went through the rooms rapidly, my vision blurry from fear, and my rushed search stopped at the second floor, where I froze at the top of the stairs, staring at the empty pedestal at the end of the hallway. That's what the running was. They stole my statue. Part of me was still shaken, thinking of how easily someone had broken in and wondering if they were planning to come back. On the other hand, I felt somewhat relieved that they'd taken it off my hands. And then there was confusion. Why steal it, of all the things I owned? And how did they manage to move it downstairs? It was really heavy, and I would hurt it. Then the door wasn't broken through. It looked as if it had been unlocked and opened from the inside. The instinct was to call the police, but I didn't have time for that yet. I was running late to the fair. I left, planning to call them when I get back. Evening came and so did my return. I parked my car in the driveway and phoned them, without even going inside the house. I told them everything. The noises, the feeling of being watched, the running, the open door and the disappearance of the statue. When they arrived, I let them inside. They returned after 10 minutes, looking at me funny. "Sir, what exactly was stolen?" "What do you mean?" "My angel statue. Right at the end of the hallway, second floor, an empty pedestal. You can miss it. Your statue is there." My eyes widened. I frowned, looking from one officer to another and shaking my head. Then I walked past them into the house. It was starting to get dark, and long shadows clung to the furniture and the walls. I didn't feel afraid. I just wanted to know what was going on. At the top of the staircase, oddly enough, the angel statue stood upright and proud, staring me right in my eyes. The hallway was cold. The source of the breeze was a window I'd probably left open. I turned back to the statue. I swear I must have been tired, because I blinked, and the statue seemed to blink too. I rubbed my eyes, then stepped closer to it. It didn't look damaged. I ran my fingers across one of its arms, and the stone felt warm. Suddenly I got grossed out and stepped away. My chest felt hollow, and dread and disgust had taken over me. I felt sweaty, and a silent headache was making its way in nigh. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't stand to look at the statue anymore. I slept in the attic that night. Somehow I felt better to be above it. That thing was grotesque, and the more I looked at it, the uglier it got. I began forgetting the beauty I had seen in it first. I needed to have Walt over and tell him I was giving him the statue back, so I texted him, Shauna, Penny, and Louis to come over the next day for some drinks. That evening, as I was fixing him a drink in the game room, I asked him about the statue. "Listen, as much as I appreciate the gesture, I feel like it's not the right fit for me. I'm a bit superstitious, and it scares me." "Bullshit, you're not superstitious. I know you." "Maybe he became superstitious," Shauna said, smiling. "Who knows? You can have religious awakenings in your 30s too, you know. Look, I'm not taking back my gift. If you don't, I'm throwing it away." Silence followed. "Really? It's dead? Serious?" "I fucking hate it. Look, man, I'm sorry. I hate it. It's ugly and cursed. It follows me around at night, and I haven't told anyone this before, but I think it goes through my stuff while I'm gone. It's scary." "A statue?" Penny laughed. "Yes, a fucking statue. Have you seen it? I'd rather die than sleep one more night in the same house as that thing. If you don't believe me, go look at it. Come on, touch it. Right in the hallway." Penny shook her head, and still smiling, stood up to check it out. I couldn't decipher Walt's expression. Disappointment, amusement, concern. Penny opened the door and stepped out in the hallway. I saw her eyes widen and her eyebrows tremble. She looked back at us, then at the end of the dark hallway. She squinted. She wasn't saying anything. Why wasn't she saying anything? "Very funny, Pen. Walt mumbled. "It's gone," she spit out, her voice trembling. We stood there perplexed, in the candlelight. "What do you mean gone?" "The pedestal is empty." Another pause followed. Shauna rushed to the hallway to look. "Holy shit, did you already take it out, Tony?" "No, we walked past it when we came here," Penn muttered. Right past it, and it was there. In the hallway at the end, on the pedestal in front of the window, in the dark. I shut the door. The house was silent, and every time the furniture creaked it startled us. We were still trying to convince ourselves that it was fine, that something explainable had to have happened. And yet our minds were working overtime to no avail. It was fucked up and unnatural. "Listen, should we look for it?" Walt asked, and his voice reminded me of his existence, of the fact that he was the reason why this all started. "Why didn't you sell it? Why did you give it to me, Walt?" I blurted out. "What? I gave it to you as a present?" "You couldn't sell it," Shauna said, calmly. "No one wanted it. You knew something was wrong with it." Her eyes met his, and I sensed his annoyance through what he wanted to maintain as a calm exterior. "I did not. I don't believe you. I think you just wanted to get rid of it, and, Knock, knock. Silence. Knock, knock. I shook my head and mouthed to Walt to stay where he is. I don't think he wanted to move anyway. No one did. Then we heard other knocks. Downstairs. Nothing could have scared me more than what I heard next. It was Louis' voice from outside, excusing himself for being late. I turned to Shauna in horror, and Penn bolted to the window. I heard the front door open and Louis' voice. "Louis, get out. Right now, please. You're not safe here." "What are you guys talking about? Are you upstairs?" "I brought some wine. I haven't tasted it yet, and I think it's a little cheap, but hey." A pause. "Tony, is that you? Are you playing peekaboo with me from the staircase? What have you gotten into?" "Louis, leave," Shauna insisted. "What? I didn't know you didn't want me here. Why did you invite me then? You think I don't see you? What's with the lights? Why are we in the dark? Are you playing some sort of game?" I had to open the door to get to him. I couldn't just yell like a coward. I placed my hand on the knob, but something was holding it from the other side. I started banging on it and yelling. I don't exactly remember what happened next. It's all blurry. I never actually saw it move, and yet I know. I heard the crack loud and clear, and I remember looking down and seeing an unfamiliar shape, which later became a skull split open and a broken flower pot. I can't get the image of brains mixed up with dirt out of my head, and the metallic smell still hasn't left the staircase. I screamed until my voice became hoarse, and I looked around for the angel, but I couldn't find it anywhere. No one believes us about the night Louis died. I've had the police question me, and they called me crazy, especially when they saw how shocked I was that my new angel statue was intact the next day and how I claimed I'd found it clutching a strand of his hair. They said it was unusual for me to tie up a statue that could never move. Worst thing is, they won't allow me to leave my house until they find me innocent. And last night, I found the ropes I'd tied the statue with broken, and the pedestal empty, again. I made the mistake of throwing it out the window, hoping its owner will follow it. Now, the statue had no place to stand on anymore, which means it keeps wandering around the house. I never looked directly at it. I thought it might be one of those weeping angels, but I think I might be wrong. I don't know where it is right now. My uncle died, leaving me his house, and a chilling secret. Our prayers are opening doors to horrors lurking beyond reality. My uncle Jonas was a recluse. I thought he was interesting, but nobody else in my family could stand him, especially my mom, his baby sister. She blamed Vietnam. It wrecked him, stole the big goofy brother she once loved, and replaced him with an imposter dredged from the putrid mud of a battlefield. When the war ended, Uncle Jonas moved in with my grandma and never left. After she died in the late 90s, when I was just a kid, he and my mom fought bitterly. She wanted to sell the house, but he refused. Being the oldest, he had just as much claim to it as she did, and he dug his heels in. Mom resented him for turning her childhood home into a hoarder's labyrinth of clothes, toys, comic books, and baseball cards. But I loved it. He let me comb through his treasures and always gifted me things I showed interest in. He was the first person I knew who used eBay, selling junk he gathered from garage sales and flea markets across upstate New York. When I was 12, they had another blowout fight, and that was the last time I saw him. We stayed in touch through email though, until life got in the way and we drifted apart. Ever since I was little, Jonas whispered legends and shared hushed warnings about the world, the supernatural and strange things he claimed to have seen. I dismissed them as the ramblings of an aging eccentric, but when he died unexpectedly, I never imagined that sorting through my grandmother's decrepit farmhouse would thrust me into a nightmare beyond comprehension. His burial arrangements were paid for and his will requested no funeral. Shockingly, he left everything to me. That meant I now shared ownership of the house with my mom. She wanted nothing to do with it. Trash it and sell the lot, she said. But I couldn't. I figured there had to be something valuable hidden in the mess, stuff worth keeping or flipping on eBay, so I took on the task alone. I arrived on a gray, wind-whipped afternoon. The house was as ancient and ugly as the gnarled oak trees that surrounded it. The porch nearly collapsed beneath me as I entered through the sad mouth of a door. The place was a disaster, but the comics and collectibles were gone. It wasn't what I expected. Instead, I found an overwhelming mass of dusty journals, faded photographs, and trinkets that seemed like occult relics. That first night, I had a dream. Jonas stood at the foot of my bed, his eyes hollow, his skin waxy and gray. His mouth moved, but the words came in whispers, layered on top of each other like a dozen voices speaking at once. Finish it. His fingers, long and bony, reached toward me, but before he could touch me, I woke in a cold sweat. The whisper still echoed in my ears. The house creaked like it was breathing. As I cleaned, the house grew on me. Maybe I'd keep it, and I think the house knew because that's when I discovered the hidden study. A false wall in the attic led to a room unlike the rest of the house. It was pristine, lined with grand bookshelves and ancient framed parchments. A Barnes and Noble-style ladder ran along the shelves. Jonas had poured time, money, and obsessive care into this place. A modern wood stove, nestled in one corner near a small octagonal window of green stained glass. It bore a strange circular symbol resembling an eye. I peered out, feeling watched instead of watching. Flipping a switch, a mechanical hum rattled above as a large skylight opened to the heavens. The moon grinned, the stars winked, warning or welcoming, I couldn't tell. In the center of the room, among relics and statues, lay a battered leather journal, its pages brimmed with ancient symbols, newspaper clippings, and frantic notes about a hidden war fought in the shadows. Jonas had been part of something called the Order of the Verdant Root. His writings told of an ancient pact, protecting the land from an unspeakable evil. According to him, modern Christianity wasn't salvation. It was a facade, an unholy gateway through which demonic entities infiltrated our world. Every hymn, every sermon, every act of forced faith loosened the seal on something buried beneath the town's oldest church. I read late into the night, drinking until my hands stopped shaking. When I woke, my head pounded, and the morning light felt like judgment. I told myself I'd prove this was all nonsense, that my uncle had been a delusional hoarder chasing shadows. But 3 days later, I wasn't so sure. Lack of sleep blurred the edges of reality. I saw things move in the corner of my vision. Whispers bled through the walls. My own reflection seemed delayed, as if watching me from somewhere else. The paranoia wrapped around my ribs like vines, squeezing tighter every hour. Then I found it, the photograph that changed everything. A yellowed Polaroid dated Herkimer, September 5th, 1971. It showed hooded figures forming a circle around a stone altar, darkly stained with unmistakable old blood. Other images followed. Grotesque rituals, sacrificial rites, robed figures bathing in entrails. My stomach churned and my heart ached as I saw the bodies of children, lifeless in pieces. Then I saw them. In the background of the main photograph, I had first thought I saw people, but the longer I stared, the clearer the truth became. Their forms were wrong, grotesque, misshapen. Jonas hadn't just collected artifacts. And in the next image, God help me, the ritual played out in gruesome detail. A child, helpless, butchered on the altar as the robed figures bathed in its blood. I dropped the pictures, like they had burned me. My heart slammed against my ribs. It was real. Jonas had been right. I drank myself into oblivion that night, but there are some horrors whiskey can't drown. I spent 3 days unraveling the truth. Jonas had been drafted into something older than war itself, indoctrinated by a fellow soldier named Callahan, the last of an Irish bloodline sworn to keep something imprisoned beneath the earth. But the church, the real church, wasn't what we thought it was. It didn't fight evil, it fed it. Every prayer, every sermon, Every act of blind faith chipped away at the seals, weakening the boundary that held them back. One day, if the order failed, the church would finally finish what it started. It taught hate and fear in the guise of righteousness. He had fought to keep the darkness at bay. Vietnam had stolen his innocence, but it had also delivered him into a war far older than any government. This wasn't insanity. This was real. And in 2 days, the full moon would rise once more. I had to act. Using John S. notes, I gathered the necessary tools, roots, oils, talismans of protection. I tracked down rare ingredients in hidden shops across Syracuse and Binghamton. I wasn't going in blind. Then, on the appointed night, I made my way to the church. The rain came and went in waves as I crouched in the shadows, waiting. My patience wore thin. Jonas had given his life to this fight. I couldn't let it end with him. Midnight was the cutoff. If nothing happened by then, I was walking away. Forever. By 11:30, I had no fucks left to give. I crossed the threshold. Inside, the silence was absolute, except for the relentless drip of water echoing off cold stone. The church's ornate interior was a macabre juxtaposition of beauty and decay as I ventured into the oldest church in Herkimer. My flashlight cast grotesque shadows as I followed his notes through the nave, past the altar to a hidden spiral staircase. The stone steps bore inscriptions in a language I didn't recognize, their meaning clear nonetheless. Worship, devotion, sacrifice. In the darkness of the cellar, the air was rank with rot and the coppery tang of blood. As I crept forward, my heart pounded in my ears to the low hum of chanting resonating from deep within the gloom. The further I ventured into the vast subterranean chamber, I could see an eerie emerald glow. In the center of the room, a profane altar stood slick with congealed gore. There, in the flickering half-light, I beheld a horror beyond mortal ken. Those figures I saw in the yellowing, blurry photos from 1971 now twisted in front of me. They were hideous, malformed creatures, hybrid beings with human features contorted into monstrous parodies who crawled and writhed about the altar. Their limbs, elongated and sinewy, ended in taloned fingers that scraped against stone as they chanted in a guttural language that clawed at the edge of sanity. These were the demonic emissaries the church had nurtured in secret for centuries. Their eyes were pits of burning malice, and every shift of their malformed bodies released a stench of decay. I retreated into the shadows, my fear gnawing at me as I saw the carcass of a dead child in a puddle of blood. The creatures clawed at the child's innards with their twisted arms and sinew, their eyes black pits of malice. These were the church's true disciples, and they were preparing for something. I swallowed my fear and reached for the talisman. The roots and oils of the ancients pulsed against my palm. Whispering the incantation, I spat inside it, beginning the ritual. A shriek ripped through the air. One of the creatures lunged, moving with inhuman speed. I'd barely had time to react before it slammed into me, claws raking my chest. I gasped, pain exploding through my ribs. My fingers clenched around the talisman, whispering the incantation Jonas had left me. My heart pounded. No turning back now. I had only seconds. With every ounce of strength, I hurled it at the altar. A blinding flash erupted as the chamber trembled. The symbols on the walls burned, their emerald glow turning molten gold. The creatures screamed agonized, furious, as the earth rumbled below my feet. One of the creature's claws raked across my skin, leaving a gash that spilled dark ichor. A force surged from beneath the floor. The ancient earth magic, the same power my uncle had devoted his life to, awakened. Thick, twisting roots burst forth from the stone, ensnaring the creature and wrenching it apart in a shower of viscera and shrieking terror. It ensnared others and began dragging them into a dark hole in the earth. I stumbled as a clawed, leathery hand clasped around my ankle. It pulled hard, yanking me toward the earth. My scream ripped through the chamber as I fell onto my back, kicking wildly. More hands surfaced, clawing, grasping. I fumbled for the knife in my jacket and slashed blindly. The blade sliced through flesh, severing a wrist. The thing recoiled with a soundless shriek as its severed hand tumbled into the open hole. I pulled myself away from the hole, gasping. I saw the talisman shimmer in the torchlight and crawled toward it. I stuffed it into my pocket and scrambled to my feet. Their screams echoed off the cold walls one by one as the ghastly beings were pulled into the depths from whence they came. And then the church bell tolled. I ran. But I knew the truth now. This was real. It had always been real. And it wasn't going to stop. In that moment, I understood Uncle Jonas had not died in vain. The Order of the Verdant Root had been formed to keep these horrors at bay, to seal the gateway between our world and the abyss. But the Church's unholy covenant had begun to falter, and their demonic allies were growing bolder. Jonas had given his life to this fight. Now it was my turn. The Order of the Verdant Root still had work to do. My roots were now a curse, but I take solace in my despair, knowing that there are others like me. I'm looking for them. Are you one of us? The rules are just for your own safety. I've been working at this supermarket for about 3 months now. It's nothing special, just a way to make some cash while I figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life. Most nights are slow, and the worst thing I usually deal with is an old lady trying to use an expired coupon or a teenager sneaking beer into the self-checkout. It was usually $36 per hour. Not a bad job. But last night was different. My shift started like any other. My manager, Mr. Thompson, handed me a laminated sheet of paper as soon as I clocked in. New overnight protocol, he said, his voice tight. Read it, follow it, and for God's sake, don't break the rules. I frowned but took the list. It wasn't unusual for him to make up weird rules. He once banned blue Gatorade because he thought it looked untrustworthy, but this was different. The paper was old, stained at the edges, and the rules, well, they made no damn sense. Overnight supermarket rules. At exactly 11:15 p.m., make sure all shopping carts are inside. If any are left in the parking lot after this time, leave them. Do not go outside to retrieve them. The security cameras will glitch between 11:30 and 11:45. Do not attempt to fix them. Do not look directly at the monitors during this time. If you hear someone whisper your name in the frozen food aisle, do not respond. Do not turn around. A man in a black hoodie may come in around midnight. He will not buy anything. Do not acknowledge him. Do not meet his eyes. If you see a child alone in the store after 12:30 a.m., do not approach them. No matter how scared they look, no matter how much they cry, do not take their hand. They are not lost. At 1 a.m., the intercom will turn on by itself. You will hear static, then a voice. It will sound like a loved one. It will beg you to open the stockroom door. Do not open the stockroom door. If a customer tries to buy raw meat and milk together after 1:45 a.m., refuse the sale. If they persist, tell them, we're out of stock. If they smile at you, leave your register immediately. The lights in aisle 7 will flicker at 2:30 a.m. If they go out completely, leave the store. Do not look down aisle 7 as you exit. If you hear the sound of heavy breathing near the break room, do not enter. Call Mr. Thompson immediately. If he doesn't answer, wait outside until your shift ends. Never, under any circumstances, look at your reflection in the freezer doors after 3 a.m. I laughed at first, thinking it was some elaborate prank, but Mr. Thompson didn't laugh. Just follow the damn rules, he said, rubbing his temples like he had the worst migraine in the world. Oh yeah, by the way, your pay has been increased to $45 per hour, so follow the rules. I immediately stopped laughing. By the time 11:15 rolled around, I was already on edge. I had my hands on the door, ready to grab the last few shopping carts, when my phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Thompson. Leave them now. I froze, my eyes darting to the parking lot. The carts sat there, gleaming under the flickering streetlights, and then I swear to God one of them moved. Just an inch, just enough to squeak against the pavement. There was no wind. I stepped back inside and locked the doors. At 11:30, the security monitors glitched. The screen warped, turning black and white, then static. For a second, I saw something. A shape, tall and thin, standing in the cereal aisle. The screen flickered again. The shape was closer, right at the edge of the camera's view. Another flicker. The screen went black. At midnight, the man in the black hoodie arrived. He didn't shop. He didn't even pretend to. He just stood near the entrance, watching. His hood was pulled low, his hands stuffed in his pockets. I kept my eyes on the register, my breath shallow. At 12:30, a child appeared near the candy aisle. She was small, no older than 6. Her dress was torn, her hair matted. She sniffled, rubbing at her eyes. "Mister," she whimpered, "I can't find my mommy." My hands trembled. "I can call someone for you," I said, reaching for the phone. "No." Her voice was sharper now. "I just need you to take my hand." Something was wrong with her face. Her eyes were too dark, too deep, like 2 pits carved into her skull. My stomach churned. I turned away. At 1 a.m., the intercom crackled. The voice that came through was my mother's. "Sweetheart," she said, "I need you to let me in. Please, baby. I'm outside the stockroom." I gripped the counter, my heart hammering. My mother had died 5 years ago. At 1:45, a man tried to buy raw steak and a gallon of milk. When I refused, he smiled. His teeth were too sharp. At 2:30, the lights in aisle 7 flickered, then they went out. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't look at aisle 7. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping in the cool night air. I wanted to quit, but something inside me needed to know more. The next night, I was scheduled with a new coworker, Jason. I asked Mr. Thompson why we suddenly needed 2 people on shift. He hesitated before saying, "The last guy who worked with me disappeared." We found that list of rules in his locker. Jason was skeptical. He laughed at the rules and broke one on purpose. He looked at his reflection in the freezer door at 3 a.m. and then he started screaming. I turned just in time to see him clutching his head, his mouth gaping open in a silent howl. His reflection didn't move the same way he did. It smiled, stepped forward, and pulled him into the glass. Jason was gone. His reflection walked away. And then it turned to look at me. I ran. Now I understand why we follow the rules. But it might already be too late for me. An app took my friends and I to an old graveyard. I think something came back with us. I'm a girl with a friend group of 3 boys. They get into stupid shenanigans all the time. But growing up, I was always told boys will be boys, so I never paid any mind to it. I've known 2 of them since middle school, and the third was my fiance, so more often than not, I was with them on these stupid adventures. We were young, burly 18 when we hung out that day. "Dude, we should go somewhere tonight. I'm bored as hell," Joseph said with a groan as he flicked out his cigarette. "Where would we go? It's like midnight." Kyle asked. We were hanging out at my house, which was in the most boring city in the state. "You feel like driving for a bit? I have this app that takes you to haunted places." Joseph quoted the phrase haunted places with his fingers. Half of these apps were scams anyways, but we were bored and stupid, just wanted to drive. "What the hell? Doesn't sound like a bad idea." My fiance agreed nonchalantly. Every show on the television getting boring, and it was the weekend. Nobody had anything to do. We got into Kyle's car. He had the best tires out of the 4 of ours. He pulled the address onto his GPS, the car filled with the usual banter. It took about an hour until we were out of town, and at the location, an old rundown and possibly abandoned graveyard. I had a bad feeling from the start, but we asked for a haunted place and got one. Joseph had this app on his phone. It was supposed to transmit radio frequencies into a voice from the deceased. Feeling like it would make the trip even more creepy than its looks, he pulled it up as we walked down the dirt path that separated rows of tombstones. Honestly, it was boring at first, until the app made a static sound and played a distorted voice. "Over here," the voice said. It was deep and unclear, but we were able to understand it. I heard Kyle mutter, "What the fuck?" Normally the app made random sounds, if anything at all, but it was giving directions. "Where?" Joseph asked to the darkness outside of our cell phone flashlights. It took a few moments of listening to static, until it spoke again. "You're right." With that, we turned to our right, walking in between tombs. "Keep going," it said after we got to the last tombstone, before it cut off into a dark forest. Finally, Kyle spoke again, pulling Joseph back by his shoulder while me and my fiance walked closely behind. "We aren't going in that, are we? It'll end up being some hunting ground and we'll get shot." Kyle gestured to the forest. Personally, going there would be the last thing I do, but I was along for the ride and didn't want to be left alone anywhere. Before Joseph could speak again, a woman's voice, though barely understandable, spoke through the phone. "Turn back." "Yeah, fuck this," Kyle said as he turned around. My Fince and I followed him while Joseph stood at the forest edge for a moment before following us. As we got back on the path, we heard a growl come from the forest. Assuming it was some animal, we kept walking, my finance keeping an eye in the darkness of the trees. We kept walking, reading some forgotten tombs, wiping some of the dirt off so at least the names were legible. But everyone was a bit quieter, as if they felt the same sense of impending doom as I was. "Get out while you can." A woman's voice spoke through the app once again. Right after that happened, it sounded like there was running in the forest and it was approaching us, rapidly. We didn't think twice while we ran to the car. The run felt like forever, the slamming doors of the car seeming to echo in the dense atmosphere, and without wasting time, Kyle started to speed off. His car had 3 rows of seats. The third put up because of the time we hung out with 2 more of our mutual friends. I had my elbow on the seat behind me as he drove, my finance sitting next to me and Joseph in the passenger seat. We actually felt more at ease after a while, until I felt something scratch my forearm as it hung behind the seat. I quickly retracted it. "Ow, the fuck was that?" I said as if something in Kyle's trunk scratched me. He always left useless things back there that he never bothered to take out. He looked in the mirror at me, and in the darkness of the third row of seats, he seen only 2 dots floating right next to each other. Eyes. "Holy shit, Jay, there's someone back there." He swerved a bit as he suddenly yelled. My fiancé, out of fear and confusion, threw his arm back in a punch. There was a smack before the eyes disappeared into thin air. It's been months since that trip, but all 4 of us occasionally see those eyes in the darkness. It's never tried to touch us again after it scratched me. We're hanging out at my house as I type this. Kyle just looked up and seen a silhouette in the darkness. Its head was bent since it was so tall it had to duck to the roof, its limbs skinny and unnaturally long to its body. It's standing right next to the front door and blocking off the hallway to the back. I hear screams from the future. "Johnny, Johnny." My mother was shouting "Johnny, Johnny," as she ran toward me, covering my eyes to prevent me from witnessing that scene which would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was on my way home after riding my bicycle. A few meters from home I heard a sound, like paper tearing behind me. Instinctively I turned around, but I saw nothing. When I looked ahead again, in that brief fraction of a second, a burned person appeared. They were naked, and their body was so charred that it was impossible to tell whether they were male or female. Startled, I came to an abrupt stop and fell on top of them. Their skin burned like a metal slide under the midday sun. In that moment, I got a burn on the palm of my hand and heard a whisper. That person lowered their gaze, and our eyes met. They, at the end of their life. Me, at the beginning of the end of mine. I could barely hear them. It was as if they were trying to scream, but their vocal cords were so damaged that all I could hear were moans. After the initial shock, I screamed like never before because of the pain from the burn, the macabre scene, and the sheer terror. My mother arrived running and took me home. Nothing was ever discovered about that body. The investigations yielded no results. Days passed, and I began to hear that same moan again. That is when my torture began. Every day, the screams grew more vivid and more intense. My mom tried to get help by taking me to various psychologists and even shamans, but no one could explain it. It wasn't a mental issue. The screams were real. I learned to live with those screams, although every day they became even more terrifying. Despite the torment, I managed to graduate as a physicist from college. I wasn't the best or the brightest mind of my time, but I did earn some merits during my studies. It was in college that I met Dr. Hollis. He resembled my grandfather, and he used to say that I reminded him of his nephew. Gradually, we became friends, and over time I became his right-hand man. He offered to pay the rest of my tuition if I agreed to work with him as his intern. I refused because I wanted to stand on my own, but still, I became his assistant, and he paid for my travel expenses. He never believed my story about the screams, but he was always kind to me. He was the father figure I never had. One night, Dr. Hollis called me excitedly. He wanted to speak in person. When I arrived, he told me he had found a possible solution for time travel. After many trials and errors, he managed to send a mouse a few minutes into the past. The first time it vanished without a trace. The second time it returned, but its body was charred as if it had spent hours in an oven. He wanted me to help him improve that invention, which would revolutionize humanity. He asked me to work with him unofficially. So after our regular work, I would go to his house to continue the experiments. It had been 15 years since that incident with the charred body, yet the screams had never stopped tormenting me. Even though I could sometimes tolerate them, they still remained as intense as ever. One night, just as we were about to leave, the machine turned on. We had sent something from the future into the past. It was a body. Dr. Hollis was frightened. We did not know at what moment in the future the trip had been made, nor who the person was. They were burned, parts of their body completely charred, yet the center bore only superficial burns. Days passed without us touching the machine until I discovered the reason the bodies were arriving like that. It was an energy cell, one that released an immense burst of heat within the machine. Once I realized this, I corrected the calculations. When we were about to test the adjustments with a mouse, the screams changed. "Johnny, don't do it, please." It was my own voice. Startled, I stepped back and unintentionally pushed Dr. Hollis into the machine. He was sent into the past by mistake. He was the body we had discovered that night. I became obsessed with fixing my mistakes. I wanted to save the doctor, to avoid seeing that person that afternoon. If I hadn't seen them, the screams would never have begun, and I would never have killed the only father figure I ever had. But the more I adjusted the machine, the clearer the voices became. I begged myself to stop, to not continue, but I was stubborn. After 2 years since the doctor's death, I believed I had finally fixed the errors. I converted the machine into a clock, so that the heat would disperse into the air, or so I thought. I noted down the date of the trip that afternoon. I would be there to avoid seeing that man. Finally, I understood the clock. The sound of tearing paper was heard once again, and I began to travel back in time. Everything was going well until the heat started to rise. I couldn't move. The suit that was meant to protect me began to disintegrate, then my clothes, my hair. I felt my skin swell, bubbles bursting underneath it. My nails detached one by one. I screamed as I watched myself trying to fix the errors. I screamed at myself not to do it, that it was a mistake. I saw my life in reverse as my body burned and continued screaming in pain. The smell of burnt flesh filled my nostrils, and moments later my lungs burned like hell. Breathing was like dying, yet that pain was the only thing keeping me awake. I thought about my mother. They would never find my body. She would believe that I abandoned her, that I forgot about her. Then Dr. Hollis crossed my mind. Had he suffered the same, or perhaps worse? He wasn't even wearing a suit. Maybe his death was quicker. I hoped that would ease my conscience. The journey lasted 20 minutes, and the entire trip was pure torment. My voice was shattered. I could only emit agonizing moans. Finally, I heard the sound of tearing paper once more. The same sound I had heard so many years ago when I was just a child. I fell, my flesh burning red, on the outskirts of my house. I saw a boy on a bicycle turning to look at me, terrified, and falling onto me, burning the palm of his hand with my own body. I don't believe in ghosts, but sometimes I'm tempted. Be warned, this is a true story, recounted in the best detail I can remember, so it is long. Forgive me for being vague, changing a few names and indirectly related details here and there to obscure identities. Between the ages of 16 and 20, I dated a girl that actually lived in her local haunted house. It was a large flagstone farmhouse in a hamlet in the northeast of England. For hamlet, imagine 12 houses and a pub on a hillside. It was only about 10 minutes walk along a country road from the next village, a larger settlement that was originally built to accommodate local miners around the turn of the 20th century. Her house was at the top of the hill and was the oldest building in the area by at least 100 years. To give some idea of the size of the house, after the farm had stopped working and was sold early 1900s, the house had been partitioned into 2 homes to provide accommodation for miners. Later, after the mining company sold out and the miners were leaving, her parents had bought the 2 houses with the idea of renovating them and turning them back into a single, very large house. Now her parents were wealthy, and so the work on the house had been ongoing for over 10 years, mostly DIY by the time I started dating her. The place was huge, with high ceilings, outbuildings in the yard, rooms in various states of completion, and the whole property was surrounded by old trees. The interior had a strange layout due to the reversed partition. There was one large old staircase on one end of the house, and a newer staircase on the opposite end, built when the building was split. Downstairs were 4 large rooms. One had been kept as a kitchen with original fireplace. The other 3 were in the process of being converted into living and dining rooms. Upstairs were 6 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, along one long corridor, with a hatch at each end leading to a huge attic space that spanned the house. The attic was the subject of local rumor. Her friends from the nearby village would frequently joke about her house being haunted and would recount various stories about a family who were terrorized by their abusive father, with rumors of suicide or possible murder taking place in the attic on one end of the building. There were also stories of the land itself being haunted due to accidents which had occurred in the mine tunnels beneath the hill. If you're familiar with the old northern mining towns, you'll know that stories of pit disasters are common. There are even entire towns ostensibly named after such incidents. See Burn Hope and Pity Me. My girlfriend seemed to be quite proud of the fact that living there gave her a reputation for bravery. A haunted house on haunted land was quite a boast, although she often admitted to being scared at times. She had told stories of seeing and hearing things in the house that made her feel significantly less brave. She had heard footsteps in the attic, and when he lived at home, her older brother claimed to have seen the shadow of a person outside of his bedroom door, directly below the attic hatch. Her father had also said that early on in the renovation he had removed bothering murals, which were painted on upstairs walls on one side of the house, although he refused to describe their content. It was always hard to know if these stories were exaggerated for the sake of local gossip, but naturally I ate them up with a spoon. One of the best things about the house, from our teenage POV, was the fact it was often empty. My GF's brother was living away studying at university. Her parents were both involved in coaching athletics at a reasonably high level, meaning they would frequently travel to competitions. This gave me a great opportunity to stay over for several days at a time, which I usually did. In general, I found the house creepy, but never heard or saw anything too terrifying. Other than the occasional creak or bump, which could easily be attributed to aging architecture, I felt reasonably safe there for a while. As you can imagine, the ghost stories fascinated us all as teenagers. And so one weekend when we were about 18, we invited some friends to stay over with us for a ghost party. Generally, we were wary of having parties since areas of the house were unfinished, and we really didn't want to piss off my GF's parents and lose our sweet love pad, but we figured that a small one wouldn't hurt, especially now that we were oh so mature. We invited 6 people over and spent the early evening exploring the outbuildings and attic, telling and listening to spooky stories about the house and the area. My favorite tale was that if the crying babies, it was said that if you listen carefully at just the right time, on just the right day each year, you could hear the distant sound of babies crying. A spectral memorial to the exact moment a mine tunnels collapsed decades before, killing several miners and triggering tremors that disturbed the local infants. After tiring of ghost stories and fruitless ghost hunting, we ordered pizza, had a couple of drinks each, and by about 1 a.m. we retreated to the most renovated living room to watch TV and drink more. This is when things got scary. One of the girls, we'll call her Sophie, was getting quite highly strung about the normal creaking and spookiness of the house, and requested that someone come upstairs with her and stand guard in the corridor while she went to pee. She left the room with Matt, who clearly had a crush on her, and we all laughed as we heard their footsteps above us, obviously walking past the bathroom and further along the bedroom corridor. Then the door to our living room burst open like it had been kicked in, and both of them rushed in, looking whiter than your white grandma trying to do a raps. Matt blurted that they had seen a shadow at the top of the stairs, and they hadn't gotten more than halfway up. He insisted it was one of us bastards that had snuck up the other staircase to scare them, but even he didn't seem to believe it. We said that we heard footsteps along the corridor, but we hadn't left the room. Surely it was Matt that was trying to scare us. The fact is, we were all scared and none of us quite knew what to believe. We decided to all go up and look around, and so we did, like some kind of disparate group of teens disgorged from a green minivan to hunt old men disguised as ghosts. We crept upstairs. Somehow I think we felt that if we were quiet, we wouldn't anger the ghost. I can be flippant now, but at the time we were all running on 90% adrenaline and 10% alcohol. The tension was palpable, and every creak of the house or sigh of wind at the window had us freezing in place and staring desperately into shadows in the hope of seeing nothing staring back at us. Nothing in my life has felt so dangerous as the seconds we spent sneaking under the attic hatch hoping it stayed shut. After a few minutes we had swept the bedrooms and bathroom at one end of the house, and the tension was calming. Naturally, we lads began to talk about how we definitely weren't scared, and definitely wanted to catch the ghost. Although this was the opposite of true in my case, it did seem to relax everyone, and a few of us went to check the other bedrooms. I knew that we were heading into the end of the house where my GF's older brother claimed to have seen shadows, and where the murals had apparently been. I wasted no time in whispering this to my 2 companions as we swept the bedrooms and passed furtively under the second attic hatch. It was just as we moved towards the final bedroom that we heard something on the stairs near us, the smaller staircase that was built when the house was partitioned. It was a low creaking sound that started almost like a sigh and seemed to drag on in slow motion as we all froze and willed ourselves to turn back and look. It could have been the wood creaking as the house cooled in the dead of night. It could have been the tortured soul of an abusive father coming to reclaim his home. I will never know because I ran first, bolting along the corridor with my brave compatriots in tow back towards the rest of the group who instantly panicked at the sight of me and ran downstairs. We did what frightened ghost hunters always do, ran straight back to the last room where we felt safe, the almost renovated living room, and slammed the door shut behind us. We immediately descended into a panting rabble, talking over each other with unanswered demands. What happened? Did you hear it? Did you see anything? Was it the ghost? Where's Sophie? Did you break my dad's torch? Are you staying over? I need a squad tonight. Wait, where the fuck is Sophie? Everyone froze around me. I don't know if she was with you guys. She was, but she isn't here now. Is she? Tia, my GF, was not happy with me, ignoring the obvious. Shall not be happy we left her. Matt was cut off by a muffled scream of pure terror and the sound of feet thundering along the corridor above us. We burst back out of the living room and headed towards the stairs, just as Sophie burst into the kitchen, through the door opposite, covered in tears and hyperventilating. I saw someone outside, then you were gone. Where were you? Didn't you follow us? Tia with the pertinent question. I went to the loo. I thought you were right outside. I saw someone through the window and you left me. Evidently, Sophie had decided to take the opportunity to finally go to the toilet, with a whole group standing guard. She claimed she hadn't heard us run, which seemed impossible given how loud a herd of teenagers would be on the old wooden floors of the house, but we were all more fixated in the question of who or what she had seen in the garden. We spent at least 15 minutes peering out of the downstairs windows to no avail, cupping our hands to the glass, peering at every trembling shrub and oddly cast shadow. But none of us could quite bring ourselves to actually go out and look. We couldn't even brave going back upstairs for a better view. Eventually, with the help of cigarettes and alcohol, Sophie calmed down enough to explain that she thought she had seen the silhouette of a bald man passing through the yard area between the house and the outbuildings. Evidently, she had frozen in fear for a moment, and simply not realized we were having our own moment of terror in the corridor outside the bathroom. Eventually, we all calmed down and almost convinced ourselves that we had most likely been scared by the normal sounds of the house. Being a skeptic is sometimes necessary to preserve your own sanity, if nothing else. By 3 a.m., we were calm enough to go to sleep. Downstairs on the couches in the living room, nobody was sleeping upstairs that night. In the morning, we woke up a little hungover and shared a smoke and a laugh about the night's events, all secretly relieved to have survived without further incident. We couldn't decide who was the most scared, so we gave up and Tia and I went to make everyone coffee. In the kitchen, the room right next to where we'd slept, the glass in the washing machine door was smashed, and the door hinges were so buckled back on themselves that they were barely holding the frame onto the machine. This, out of everything, was the most chilling moment of the whole episode. We had been asleep in the next room and I hadn't heard a thing, but the door had clearly been exposed to significant force. How could we not have heard it? Nobody had heard a thing, and everyone claimed that they were sure the door wasn't damaged when we were trying to look for the stranger in the garden. We never really pressed the issue. I think Tia and I were both scared that the more we asked, the more frightening the ignorance of our friends would become. Eventually, we decided to tell her parents that I had slipped and fallen into the machine whilst trying to load it. Clumsy, apologetic boyfriend was easier to explain than hysterical party of drunk teenagers, and definitely easier than poltergeist. Although both of those latter explanations felt equally likely at the time. I have never forgotten that night. It's the closest I've been to believing in ghosts. Writing it out now, I realize how much of the experience was built on our collective imagination and hysteria, but of the very few incidents we did encounter, one too many remains unexplained for my liking. My name is Courtney, I'm 23, and I have a problem. A weird problem. The gifts started as sweet, then they turned dark. It started when I bought my house around 5 months ago. The first few days I moved in, everything seemed normal. Well, everything except for the busted air conditioning. But that's beside the point. The morning of the first gift, I had gotten out of bed and got going as usual. I got out of bed, fed my cat Misty, and had started my coffee when I noticed a small package on my coffee table. It was round the end of the second week of living there that it started happening. Shocked, I looked all around for the person who had left it. I searched in closets, under my bed and guest bed, even going as far as to check the air ducts. Nothing. No one. I knew it couldn't be any of my friends, nor my parents, as none of them had the code to my front door. It was wrapped in plain white paper with a small sage green ribbon tied neatly around it. Not wanting to touch it, I got dressed and walked to the cafe down the street where I've been working as a barista for 4 years. Walking through the front door, that's when I saw it again. The package. I worked my long 8-hour shift, forgetting all about the package as I talked to my favorite regulars about their grandchildren, how their dog was doing, etc. When the day was over, I walked back home. We're wrong about the afterlife. I got home from the hospital yesterday. It's been an awful few days, to say the least. I won't tiptoe around this detail, though it's not something I'm proud of. I'm an addict, and have been for a long time. This isn't the type of PSA you're thinking of. Please bear with me. Don't get me wrong. Drug addiction will ruin your life, only to swiftly end it. I've seen it tens of times before, but that's the least of my worries right now. Everyone has their own way to escape their life. For some, it's something as innocent as a TV show or a book. Others turn to pleasures like sex or food. Relatively early on in my life, I turned to opioids. I had an injury in high school and got some prescription painkillers. That was the start of it for me. It really does feel like a spider's web. It's so easy to wander further down that road, lost in the pleasure and carefree, but leaving again is almost impossible. At least that's how I feel about it. 2 nights ago, I was spending my time escaping. By that, I mean I was in my dark, rundown apartment, sitting on my couch as the TV flickering its light onto me with a band around my bicep and a needle in my forearm. There are many types of opioids. My particular weakness, as I'm sure you can gather, was heroin. I'm not picky about how I take it. Snorting, smoking, injecting. As long as I get my high, I don't care. But injecting it is instant. As soon as I pressed down on that syringe, my troubles left me. The best word I can use for it is euphoria. My achy body doesn't hurt anymore. I'm not sad, lonely, or scared anymore. I just feel calm and good. I sank into my couch, exhaling all of my worries. It's sad to say that moments like these were the happiest I had in a long time. After drowning in bliss for a while, my vision started to blur. My breath went in and out more and more slowly. My body felt heavy, like a bag of sand. The TV sounded so distant, like I was hearing it underwater. For just a second, I realized what was happening, and I remember being scared, but it was too late to fight it by then. I died that night, laying there on the couch in my filthy clothes. It was fast and slow all at the same time. I felt my life slipping away, being pulled away like water draining from a bathtub. Thinking about it now, I'm so ashamed. What a truly pathetic end that would have been. He'll skip ahead to answer the question I'm sure you're thinking. I wasn't dead for very long. By some miracle, my best friend had come to check on me. He found me near death and called an ambulance. But there was an eternity between these events. I never really put much thought into an afterlife. Why would I? For most of my life, being high was my God. That was the purpose I served and chased after. Sure, I had heard about heaven and hell, but not only did I not really believe in them, I didn't bother to consider them in my daily life. Those thoughts were as far from my mind as they could ever have been. But from what I very recently learned about most interpretations of an afterlife, I think we're wrong. At least the hell I experienced didn't fit the descriptions I've read since I woke up. My soul didn't go to any fiery pits of wailing and weeping, nor cloudy, beautiful skies adorned with angels and harps. In fact, it didn't go anywhere at all. I think that's the scariest part to me. I was dead slumped on that filthy couch, and I would rotted there. But I didn't go anywhere. I was stuck in my own body, a prisoner in a cell of my own meat and bone. I could still feel through my cold skin, see through my glassy eyes, hear the TV chattering across from me, but I couldn't move. I was stuck looking at my ceiling. Noise was still slow, as if the movie was running at less than half speed. My lungs still burned for air, and my eyes screamed for me to blink, but I couldn't. I tried to think of a way out of this. Maybe I could will my body to work again. Maybe I could force my lungs to breathe and my heart to beat. But my body wasn't my own anymore. It felt like I was trying to push down a house while numb on succinylcholine, choline, fully awake, fully aware, but locked inside a body that refused to obey. After what felt like years of struggling, I gave up. This allowed for panic to fill me. I was dead. They were going to bury me, or worse, cremate me. I thought I would be doomed to exist as a soul within a corpse, forever, hidden away in the earth and forgotten. I tried to turn my attention away from my pain and fear. I tried to think of my family, my parents and siblings. I would never speak to them again. I wanted to sob, but my body remained a useless pile of flesh. I spent an eternity there on that couch. I went through every thought I could ever think, every regret I had replayed endlessly. I cursed myself for wasting my life. I lamented my horrible fate. I dreaded that there was no escape. The concept of eternity crushed me, with more weight than the bottom of the sea. Death was no sweet release. It was an unending nightmare. My mind had time to shatter, to splinter into 1,000 pieces and then put itself back together again. Finally, my friend found me. I watched him through unblinking eyes as he shook me, called my name, and begged me to wake up. I knew I wouldn't wake. I watched him call the police, and another eternity later, I watched them try to revive me. They used Narcan to bring me back. Time sped up. Life crashed back into me like a tidal wave. I sat upright and gasped for air. I blinked until my eyelids hurt. I sobbed, cried, and screamed in terror and relief. I begged them not to let me die again, not to let me be trapped. They carted me away to the hospital, trying their best to calm me and stop my nonsensical begging. The doctors tell me I wasn't officially dead, at least not at first. The state I was in before my friend found me is what's known as a temporary death. Breathing stops and your body begins to shut down. All in all, I was clinically dead for just over 3 minutes. That's how much time passed in between my death and my revival. 3 minutes felt like countless lifetimes. I know one day I will die permanently. Nothing in this frightens me more than death and an eternity of imprisonment within myself. I will do everything in my power to never experience that again. I've decided to join a church. I'm going to sell everything I have and dedicate myself to God. I have no idea what else I can do. Still, the idea of eternity terrifies me. The concept that I could experience this for millions of years and I'd still be no closer to freedom than I was before, it's scarier to me than anything. I can't help but think of a book I read in high school, The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. It's about the afterlife. In it, hell has a gate with an inscription that reads, "Abandon all hope, you who enter here." I've learned firsthand why. If this was hell, there is indeed no hope to be had. Maybe what I went through was hell. Whether or not it was my own personalized hell or not, I don't know. That thought sickens me most of all. Does all of humanity share what I saw? Is every grave filled with a soul? Is every mausoleum a prison for some damned person, locked in their own corpse? I don't want to consider it. The implication that our world is filled with the living dead, tormented people who have spent countless years suffocating without release or peace and will spend infinitely more till it's too much for me. And never touching heroin again or any drug. I will hold on to this life I have for as long as I can. And when I do go, all I can do is hope God will save me from my flesh. The lightning in this town wants me dead. The first time I was struck by lightning was in the summer 3 years back. I was coming home from working on a neighbor's car when the rain started, a red-black cloud like a slit gut splitting the sky in half. Well, about damn time, I thought. It had been a dry August, and a little moisture would have done the town good. It was as I got out of my car that a feeling up the back of my neck gave me pause. Growing up near bear country, you get to know the sense of some big animal watching you, and I had that same sense then, only it came from where that dark cloud bled and threatened a storm. I'd never held with Walpurgis Town superstition, nor what folks said about the things living in the national park nearby, or what was walking in the mountain forest beyond. If you listen to the way people get going around here, you'd think that there were devils and spirits of all kinds just about everywhere you looked. It was just talk, that's all I figured. But as I looked up at that dirty cloud and heard the start of thunder, I could hardly move with the dread of that storm coming in. I stood where I was, like my boots had been nailed down to the driveway, the rainfall soaking my shirt through to the skin. Still, the bear feeling ran up and down my neck, and if my legs had worked right, I would have ran. The first visible lightning flash came so close that I could smell the reek of sulfur and ozone, felt the heat of it blast me like the first step out of an aircraft into a tropical country. I remember thinking that it was a bluff charge, trying to scare me off out of its way, only for all I wanted to. I still could not move. Fear like that gets people killed in the wilderness every day, and right there in the heart of Walpurgis, I came close. There was another growl of thunder, and even before the second bolt of lightning struck, I knew that it would hit me, that what was up there in the sky was no natural weather phenomenon, but something like the mountain god the cult up in Hilltown kneel to, as the rumors go. Black bear, I thought. Hunter lightning. Funny where our minds go at times like that. I recall a pull like hands all down the back of me yanking me to the ground, then a light in my eyes of such a whiteness I thought it burned me blind. Next thing I knew, I was on my back in the driveway, my throat full of smoke, and then my wife was running out of the house screaming my name and pulling my clothes off where they'd melted down to the skin. Jesus, Anne, I heard myself say distantly. I'm alright, just get me up and inside. Ain't safe out here. The shock had washed my fear into calm, and in a way I wish it hadn't, being that it made it easier to forget what I'd felt before that bolt knocked me down. I brushed it off as something I'd imagined in the panic of being caught out in the storm, terror attaching character and purpose to something that had none. It was an accident, I said to myself. That was all. I spent a couple of days holed up in a hospital ward, counting my blessings that I only had second-degree burns. More visitors came by than I cared to see, being that my ordeal had exhausted me to the point I would have gladly killed a man if it meant that I could sleep some. Anne got me through it all, sitting by me with her hand in mine, no matter the time, day or night. Though she didn't talk much, I had the notion she'd seen something that afternoon that spooked her. Seen or felt it like eyes on her as she ran out to pick me up off the ground. A hostility, she'd later call it. Not a thinking sort of hatred like a human being would have, but like something startled in the woods and mad about it. Once I was out of the ward and my burns had healed up, I went back to work, pushing that day as far out of my head as it would go. I traveled out of town for a time, worked in other places that rained heavy and stormed hard, and though I got myself indoors quicker than I would have done before the incident, I felt nothing like I had in Walpurgis. I'd been mistaken, I thought. Must have been. Only Anne biting at her lip and looking at me strange, whenever a hard rain got going, made me think any different. Listen, I said, once I'd had just about enough of this. It'll be fine. It ain't gonna happen again. It might, Anne insisted. People who've been struck by lightning once are more likely to get struck again. I read it online. Being that Anne read more or less everything online and from questionable sources, I paid this no mind. It says I was putting my coat on that she said, "You ain't the only one that got hit in that storm, Joe." I looked round at her, brows just about up to my ears. Well, who else was? Fred Meyer, my second cousin. You know him. I did. Anne's family were of the old German settler stock, up in the north side of town. Most still had traces of the accent, and some even spoke a little German, mainly the older folks. I figured that's where all the superstition in this town came from, old ghost stories and fairy tales from that far country. Fred Meyer, I said. Sure, I know him. So how'd it happen? He was out hiking with some folks when they got caught out in the bad weather. Weren't forecast, so they couldn't reschedule or anything. Well, they were heading up some high path when Fred started acting strange, said he was sure something was after him. Next thing they knew, a big old lightning bolt came down and they were all flat on their backs, half stunned, and Fred hit so bad he couldn't move all down his left side. Well, shit, I said. How's he doing now? Anne shrugged. Getting his movement back some. He ended up in some hospital out of town because of overcrowding. Else we would have seen him, I bet. I ought to visit. You take yourself over there, I said. He'll be glad to see you, I'm sure. Anne was clearly hoping I'd stay home after what Shed told me, and in hindsight I should have. As it was, I went to do some work on a roof that had shingles blown off it in the storm. I'd always been an odd jobs man, and I could repair just about anything I set my hand to. I felt a whole lot better once I was up there on the top of that house, being of use to someone. Keeping active keeps the mind clean, and I had a lot of dirt to shake. But it was while I was up there, sweating and cursing under the sun, that I got that feeling of woodland eyes on me again, so strong that I couldn't brush it off or ignore it the way I wanted to. For a while I told myself maybe there was a coyote or a wild cat around watching me from the street, but no matter which way I turned, I couldn't see a thing. I sat up on that roof, scared without a cause, starting to blame Anne for putting an idea in my head I couldn't seem to shake. Then, like some disgruntled animal, the first thunder boomed over me, and I was on the ladder and scuttling down it so fast that my boot missed a rung and my heart just about dropped out of my ass. I held onto either side of the ladder, my loose foot scraping desperately for grip. Whatever that storm was had been watching me, and now it had me where I couldn't run. A fork of lightning thrashed the rooftop so close that all the hairs on my face singed off with the heat. The force of that nearby blow punched the ladder clean off the wall, and it's lucky I didn't have too far to jump clear of it before it fell on top of me. I lay on my back, breathing hard, trying to get myself up and failing each time. It was having that pressure over me that did it, the knowing that the lightning was hostile and aware of me. Though it couldn't eat like a bear, it could kill me as surely as one. It's as I was thinking this that a second strike clapped over my head, and what I felt then was like being hit by a lit firework, a force that stunned me into the black of near death that I'd seen once before. I felt an uncanny acceptance come over me, and I waited to die. Terror burned out of me into cold. When I came round, I was surprised that nobody had run over to check on me, but with the storm still going strong, most folks were likely safe indoors. I stayed where I was, eyes closed, hoping to God the lightning wouldn't notice that it hadn't killed me. I probably lay there a good 20 minutes before I dared to get up again, stiff all over with the taste of metal so strong in my mouth that I had to spit. My heart seemed to beat off rhythm, though whether it was the strike that did it or the fear that still had not left me, I do not know. That was the first time in my life I've had to leave a job unfinished, though at least I had a solid reason. I thought about lying to Anne about why I'd had to call it off, but she knew as soon as I walked through the front door what had happened. I had burns running down my shoulders like the branches of red trees or the scratches left by claws. "Oh," said Anne. "Oh, Joe, what are we going to do?" There were 2 more incidents with the lightning after that. The first time I was indoors, cooped up in front of the computer looking into some online courses my wife had been on my neck to take so as I wouldn't have to go outside to work so much. I knew she was onto a decent idea, but I've only ever been good with my hands and I couldn't make head nor tail of anything I was looking at. I guess that's why I didn't notice the clouds building outside my window till the first roll of thunder went off like the sound of vehicles colliding on a wet road. It occurred to me that the sound had always come first in this sinister weather, that this, too, was wrong. Then the lightning snapped so close to the house that the whole window lit up white, harsh enough that my eyes watered with it. I remember thinking, "Can't get me in here, can you, you old bastard," before it struck again, this time somewhere on the roof. All the lights in the house blew out with a noise like a shotgun blast, and I felt the shock of it all up my arm from touching the keyboard, knocking me off my chair and against the wall. I sat there cradling the limb, muttering the Lord's Prayer and stuttering like hell over it too. All the while that storm went to work out there, and I could swear that it was angry it couldn't do more. Like it could see me, smell me, just couldn't get in. Burning out all the electrics was the closest it could get. "This ain't right, Joe," said Anne, shaking next to me in bed later that night. "How did it get inside? How did it know where you were when?" When it couldn't see you, she meant. She was starting to think the same way I was. The last time the lightning got me was a month later when I'd been cooped up for so long out of work that I'd started going a little stir crazy. I checked the skies beyond the windows with a paranoid frequency, desperate to go outside but in such a fear of the storm thing killing me that each time I went to my front door I could never bring myself to step foot beyond it. It was Anne's birthday coming up that finally pushed me to do it. Sure, I could have ordered her something online, but I couldn't stand gawping at that screen for even one more second. Besides, I'd noticed since the 3rd incident I had sort of a strange effect on electronic devices. Lights flickered, watches stopped working the second they were strapped to my wrist, and speakers started giving off an odd noise like they were picking up interference. All in all, I was jumping at the chance to get myself outdoors and away from everything, only I should have known better. Did know better. The confinement had sent me a little over the edge. I suppose I wasn't thinking straight, and Anne wasn't home to set me right. I let myself out of the house and set off for the nearest store on foot, telling myself that it was safer than driving, that I could duck for cover if I sensed something coming on. I hadn't cleared more than a few blocks when I felt a raindrop hit the back of my neck and nearly jumped a mile. Looking up at the sky, I saw a black cloud had started pooling like blood in a blue iris, and I recognized at once that it was the same storm that had kept on me since the start. I felt a sweat starting under my shirt, but all I felt was cold as panic took me in a stranglehold. There was the feeling I was face to face with an animal, each of us waiting to see what the other would do. Out of the corner of my eye, I took measure of the nearby buildings, judging how quickly I could get myself inside and wait for the storm to pass. Before I knew it, I was running as fast as my body would let me, being that I was 40 and my previous injuries had me feeling a good deal older. I felt a weight over me like something pressed down from within the sky, and it was just as I got myself through the door of a tired-looking bar that lightning hit the sidewalk, shattering the windows in a rain of charred glass. The bar staff rushed forward to assess the damage, hanging cautiously back as the storm roared in the street beyond. "Shit," a man said to me. "Are you all right? You nearly got yourself shocked just there." "I need a drink," is all I could think to say. I don't recall how I got home. By the time I got in and lay down, I was so drunk that I went immediately to sleep. I remember thinking that it was easier that way, that if the lightning came again, I wouldn't know. When Anne found me, she sat down on the edge of the bed and started biting at her lips until I thought she'd gnaw right through to the meat. "You'll go up and see my cousin," she told me. "He's bound to know something, surely. I'll go and see him." She said it reluctantly, like it was some difficult thing she'd been working towards for a long time, which I suppose she had. I didn't see how it would help any. Surely Fred was just as lost in all this as I was. Still, I said nothing. Let Anne drive on up the next morning. Let her think it would do some good. When she came back later that night, she had a look on her face I didn't recognize, one I still can't put a name to. All I knew was that something had gone wrong while she'd been visiting. That, or she'd got wind of something she didn't much want to hear. "Well," I said, "how's Fred?" "All right," said Anne, setting her handbag down on the floor. "Well as he can be, hasn't been outside in weeks. My great Aunt Lena was there with him, visiting from out of town. We got to talking." "Ain't Lena the one into all that cosmetology shit?" I asked. "Meteorology, honey. Weather studies. She says even before her boy got struck and holed up in that hospital she was reading all about it, keeping scrapbooks of old newspaper clippings and articles she printed off from her computer. Real organized. She showed me everything Shed put together, said Shed tried taking it to all sorts of people, the authorities, psychics, experts in weather phenomenon. Nobody paid her any notice." "About what?" I asked, though I knew almost since Shed started talking where the conversation was leading up to. "The lightning," said Anne. "It was 65 last time it went after people the way it's been doing this summer. The autumn of that year there were flash storms, just about every week or so. Lightning that just snuck up on you. Caught houses on fire, blew electrics and knocked trees down. All the things you'd expect at first. Then it started after people. There was a little girl, Hannah Miller. Lena knew her pretty well, played with her sometimes. She was just 12 years old when the lightning hit her the first time. She was riding her bicycle up and down outside her house when the clouds came in, and next thing anyone knew a bolt of lightning snapped down like an elastic band and struck her clean off the bike. Her hair and clothes were on fire, but she wasn't screaming. The shock, I guess. Her mother ran out to get to her, and 4 more strikes came down, one after the other in a circle, like the storm was pacing around that girl, trying to get at her again. It only touched her the once that time, or it would have killed her. It's as the family tried moving Hannah out of state for better medical care that it did. They were loading suitcases into the back of a moving van when the storm came back. Hannah started yelling, tripped over herself trying to get back in the house, saying it was chasing her. Right then, the lightning hit that little girl 3 times, stabbing at her till she was dead. 12 years old and killed on her own doorstep. Can you imagine? I didn't much want to, but I shook my head and let Anne talk. Hannah wasn't the only one that ended up dying that way. There was a lady driving to work that said she felt something strange, like a warning bell going off in her head. She thought maybe she was about to get hit by another car, or somebody was going to run out across the road. It was that kind of feeling. The lightning hit her so fast all she saw was a white light across the windshield before she totaled her car against a fence. She lost a leg in that crash, and because of the lightning hitting her, she couldn't use her hands much either. Something to do with the nerves, I guess. The second time she was struck coming out of the hospital happened so fast, passers-by don't reckon she saw it. She died instantly. Her body was charred nearly to dust in how direct it hit. Fucking Christ, I said. I got up to make coffee, needing something to do with my hands. Aunt Lena was just a kid at that time, said Anne, but she got curious how come there had been 2 cases like that so close together. She started her research then, and just kept on going, learning all the time. Every 30 to 60 years or so, there are incidents with the lightning in this town, and this town only. It never crosses the border somehow. Aberrance, Aunt Lena calls it. Aberrant lightning lord, that lady has a way with words. Anne took the coffee cup as I handed it to her, and blew on it gently as she gathered her thoughts. Each time it comes there's reports, people sense it before they see anything, though it's never forecast and it never seems like the right weather for it. Then the lightning just keeps coming back and back till the people it hits die, except sometimes if it's starved out long enough it'll move off again. It's like it's alive, somehow. There's been plenty of folks that think it is. I nodded. When it came that first time I thought a lot about wild animals that get aggressive with human beings. Man-eating gators. Bucks that charge at people passing through national parks, because they've gotten too comfortable being approached by people or because we've started moving in on their territory. You ain't the first one to say that. Lena said the oldest accounts she could find were from the settling families. They were even more superstitious than people are now, and maybe they weren't wrong to be. What did they say? I'd given up my pretense of not believing by now, embraced what I'd known in my soul from the first day I'd encountered that lightning. The settlers thought that whatever was causing that lightning wasn't the weather at all, said Anne. More likely some kind of spirit or creature. Hell knows there's enough talk around here of that kind of thing. Sure, it looked just like lightning, but it behaved like some angry animal that got woken up or disturbed somehow and attacked whoever it saw first. Usually it'd go for 2, 3, even 5 people at one time before it settled. There wasn't any reasoning with it or chasing it off. You couldn't bargain with it, kill or hurt it. You just had to stay out of its way until it left. Or slept, I guess. The settlers had a name for it. Schwarzbär. Black bear, I said. Anne's eyes widened. How'd you know that? You don't speak a lick of German. Ain't hard to figure out. Besides, that's what came into my head that afternoon you found me in the driveway. Black bear. Hunter lightning. We sat silent a while, watching our coffee steam, not much wanting to drink. What do we do, Joe? Asked Anne at last. Well, I guess we've got to move, I said, without much confidence. How in God's name are we going to afford it? Besides, like I said, it won't work. Look what happened to Hannah. Then we wait it out, I said, exasperated. What's the longest the bear's been awake for? At this, Anne worked her teeth into the little scar on her lip. From what Lena showed me, about a year. There were times people brave stepping out too soon and got hit right away, like the bear was lying low thinking to catch them. I began to knead my eye sockets with the balls of my fingertips. So you're saying I've got to hide in here and hope I get the timing right. How are we supposed to live when I can't go to work? Anne laid her hand on mine and squeezed it lightly. Joe, it's either this or you don't live at all. I don't see that we have a choice. Just then, thunder tore over the top of the house, and I knew that Anne was right. This lightning means to kill me, and if it reaches me, it will. I heard my dog barking outside. My name is Elliot, and I live in the middle of nowhere. I don't mean that in the way that I have other people living near me. No, I don't live in a small town. I mean it in a real, isolating way. My house is about an hour's drive to even the nearest small town, surrounded by miles of thick and tall trees. Even the grass was a bit too tall, where roads seemed to stretch forever before fading into nothing. There are no neighbors for miles. The only other living creatures near me are the deer that wander into the yard once in a while, and sometimes the occasional coyote in the distance. I never mind it though, it's peaceful. I've always liked the quiet, especially after living in a large city for years. Sure, my place here is small, but I made it my home. It's a modest farmhouse with a few acres of land, the sort you would never find in a city. With overgrown fields and a small rambling garden, I'ma be honest, I've barely kept up with it. Oh, and not to mention, I'm not entirely alone. I have Harley. She's a Bernese mountain dog, thick fur with beautiful blue eyes. She's been with me for almost 4 years now, and she's my only company out here. She's always been a loyal companion, even when it feels like the isolation is closing in. I love the way she nuzzles my leg when asking for a walk, or how she curls up beside me in the evenings, her head resting on my knee, as if she could sense when something's wrong. She's my best friend out here. But last night, that's when everything started to go wrong. I had settled into the couch after a long day, just trying to relax with a book in hand. The warmth of the fire crackling in the fireplace and the soft hum of the house made it easy to drift into that comfortable space between awakeness and sleep. Harley was there, of course. She had been lying beside me, the steady rise and fall of her chest soothing. She had fallen asleep about an hour ago, her soft snores mixing with the crackling fire. Then I heard it, the barking. It wasn't anything unusual at first, a sharp echoing bark, like something was challenging the stillness of the night. But there was something off about it. I turned my gaze to Harley. She was still lying there, completely motionless. No perked ears, no wagging tail. She was out cold, not even reacting to the sound. That didn't make sense. Harley was always a vigilant dog, especially at night. She reacts to every sound, every rustle in the trees, every shift in the wind. But now, nothing. I rubbed my eyes and listened again. The barking came from outside, distant but close enough that it felt like it was calling to me. I stood up, my heart beating faster. Something wasn't right. I walked toward the window, peering into the darkness. The barking kept coming, louder now. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat as the barking echoed through the still night. It was sharp, aggressive, and persistent, like something calling out for attention. A chill crawled up my spine, the sound piercing the quiet calmness of the house. I glanced over at Harley, her body still and motionless on the couch, eyes closed. It didn't make sense. How could she be so calm with that loud, persistent barking outside? She was usually the first to bark at anything, even the slightest disturbance. But now, nothing. Not a twitch, not even a stir. The sound seemed to grow louder with every passing second, its urgency building as if someone was growing desperate. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a sense of dread settled deep in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My legs became unsteady, my heart beating in my chest as I looked further outside. I had to see it. I had to know what was out there. The window was cold beneath my fingers as I gently pushed the curtains out of view. When I opened the window, the night air crept inside with a soft, musty scent of earth and dampness. I peered into the darkness, the moonlight barely cutting through the thick trees that surrounded the house. I squinted into the darkness, and my breath got caught in my throat. The barking had grown louder, sharper, relentless. My heart thudded in my chest, but then my gaze focused on the dog in the yard. It looked like Harley. No, it was Harley, but something was wrong. I froze, feeling my pulse race as the reality of the situation began to claw at me. The dog outside wasn't moving, its fur thick and dark, glinted faintly in the moonlight, just like Harley's did. But no, it couldn't be her, could it? I turned quickly to look at Harley, who was still lying on the couch, unmoving, silent. Her eyes closed, her body stretched out in the same familiar pose. She was there, she had to be there. But the dog outside, the bandana, the pink bandana that I had never seen off of her neck, the one she always wore, was clearly visible around the dog's neck in the yard. It was Harley's bandana. But wait, Harley didn't have it on right now. I looked back at the couch. She was still there, completely still. The barking from outside was so close. Now it was real. I could feel it in my bones. I turned back to the window, but the dog outside was still there, frozen in place. Its eyes seemed to glint in the darkness. Then I realized something. I didn't take off Harley's bandana, nor was it in a place I would put it. The dog outside was Harley. So what was the dog inside? I could feel the air thicken around me, suffocating me, and my heart began to race faster, pounding so fast that I thought I might lose control of my thoughts. I started at the dog outside, frozen, staring at me. It didn't move, but its eyes, those blue eyes, seemed desperate, as if it were waiting for something. I looked at Harley again. She was still lying on the couch, perfectly still, her head resting on her paws, not moving an inch. No twitches, no little sighs, nothing. What the hell is happening? I blinked hard, hoping to shake off the overwhelming sense of wrongness that had settled in my chest. I had to make sure. I had to confirm what I already knew deep down. Slowly, I turned my back on the window and walked back to the couch. My legs felt like they were made of jelly, but I forced myself to move. I stood over her, staring at the body lying there, unmoving. I reached down to touch her. I had to. I needed some reassurance that it was still her. My hand hovered over her fur, and I hesitated. But then I placed it gently on her back, feeling the familiar warmth of her thick coat under my palm. But something isn't right. I pulled my hand away quickly. Her fur, it felt too stiff, rigid. There was no softness to it like I remembered. My breath got caught in my throat, and my heart skipped a beat. I staggered back, mind scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't make me lose my sanity. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. The truth was too much to process, but the pieces were all there. The dog outside, the one with Harley's bandana, it was her. I stumbled back toward the window, my vision starting to blur as I tried to see past the creeping shadows. The dog outside was still standing there, unmoving, staring at me. That was when I realized it hadn't been Harley in the house the past few days. It had been something else, something pretending, something that had worn her skin and taken her place. I backed away from the window, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The dog inside, that thing wasn't lying there anymore. It was staring. Silent. Waiting. Watching. That's when I ran out of my house. I ran towards the yard, my legs heavy, each step feeling like it was dragging me deeper into some unseen nightmare. My breath came in jagged gasps, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound, including the relentless barking that seemed to come from nowhere. The moonlight shone on the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. I reached the spot where I had seen the real Harley at, hoping against all reason that it was somehow a mistake, my mind playing a trick on me. That's right, maybe I had imagined it. But when I got there, my feet suddenly stopped, and I froze in place. The ground was cold beneath me, but it was the sight in front of me that froze me solid. There I saw her pink bandana, bloodied. As I stood there, staring at the bloodied pink bandana, my thoughts began to spiral. My mind tried to deny it, but deep down, I knew. I knew what I had seen outside. What I had thought was Harley wasn't a dog at all. It was a creature. Something that had taken her form, wearing her skin like a twisted mask. And now the truth slammed into me like a train. Harley's spirit had been trying to warn me. I had no time to mourn. I had to get the fuck out of there. I didn't have the luxury of understanding it fully before it all shattered. Then around me the air grew cold. I didn't hear it at first. There was no sound, just a presence, something thick and heavy in the air, but then a low guttural growl vibrated through the ground, like a dark primal whisper of hunger. My heart stopped. Before I could turn around, I felt it. The breath, hot and rancid, on the back of my neck. I just ran. I ran as fast as I could. I was stalked by a monster from the woods. I used to love sitting on my front porch, gazing at the mountain full of trees spread out before me. Each season gave me a new appreciation for the beauty of nature. Even winter, which I hate, would color my trees in the most pristine white, making them look like a crowd of bridesmaids dressed in their spotless gowns, waiting for their bride. My favorite season was fall. The explosions of colors laid out like a gigantic quilt that changed from one day to the next until the last leaf floated to the ground and surrendered to winter. I could sit there for hours watching. Time would slip away as I admired my trees in total contentment. That was before. I haven't looked at my trees in a long time ever since. It was a beautiful spring day. The blossoms on the trees were full of color right before the leaves unfurled their brilliant spring green. There was a stillness in the air. Usually the wind blows nonstop down the mountain to varying degrees of strength, but it's always there. On this day there wasn't even a puff of breeze. It felt good since the temperatures were only in the lower 70s, but something about it seemed off. My trees stood silent, unmoving, as if they had also noticed the stillness and were awaiting some unseen harbinger of ill tidings. As usual, I took solace from such thoughts by admiring my trees. As I panned through the colorful buds about to emerge, I saw something I didn't expect. One of the trees moved. It wasn't much of a movement, just a subtle twitch of a branch. I shrugged it off as a rogue breeze, but it was only in that one spot. None of the trees around it had moved. This drew my attention, and I focused on the offending spot. It was around 50 yards away, just into the tree line near a field. I picked up my binoculars, which are my constant companion when I sit on my porch, to spot various birds and other oddities. I focused on this oddity to see if it was merely my imagination. Zooming in on the offending branch, it seemed to be nothing out of order at first, but as I gave it my full attention, I noticed something odd. There were no buds on the branch. As strange as that was, the next observation I made was the branch was straight as an arrow. Intriguing, but hardly conclusive. But there were several other small branches growing straight up out of it. None of these had any buds either. These facts swirled through my mind, creating half-baked conclusions, when without warning the branch moved. I watched with rapt fascination as the branch moved, straight up. It wasn't like a breeze had caught it and waved it around as branches are wont to do. It went straight up, staying completely level as it was before. This curiosity captured my total attention as everything around me ceased to exist until I solved the riddle of the moving branch. Fanciful thoughts of Ents sprang from the favorite stories of my youth and well into adulthood. I smiled at the foolishness of such machinations. I knew my mind was having a bit of fun with me. It was the only conclusion that made any sense. This entire foray had been my mind playing tricks on me. If only that were the case, I would tell this story with the mirth of an old man spreading flights of fancy. I was about to put down my binoculars and take my mind inside for a nap, where it could venture out into a proper dream when the branch did the impossible. It moved sideways. It was like I was watching a time-lapse of the branch in its growing cycle, only none of the smaller points on the branch grew. It only got longer. And then I saw it. At the end of the branch there was a head. I've seen lots of animals during my time sitting on my porch. Bears, mountain lions, skunks, coyotes, but I'd never seen anything like this. It looked like the bare skull of a deer. There wasn't a once of skin on it. It was several sizes bigger than the largest deer skull I've ever seen. It peeked around the corner and its hand grasped the tree. It was skeletal as well. But the worst part was, it was looking right at me with its empty eye sockets. There weren't any eyes I could see. My mind didn't give me a minute to ponder if this was a figment of my imagination. I was out of my chair inside and locking the door behind me before I knew I'd even gotten up. The last thing I remembered was how high up on the tree the head was. It must have been close to 8 feet tall. I ran through the house, locking all the doors and windows, wondering how much good it would do if that thing decided it wanted in. My closest neighbor was a mile away, and I began wondering if this wouldn't be a good time to visit. While I stood in the middle of my kitchen, panicked and indecisive about what to do next, I realized, to my horror, that I had left my binoculars on the porch. The thought that this nightmare of a monster would run up and steal my binoculars was totally ludicrous, but if I wanted to check through the window to see if it was still there, they would be quite invaluable. Convincing myself to retrieve them was another matter. I slowly approached the window that looked out onto the front porch, as if it were the monster waiting to grab me and drag me to its lair. With great trepidation and using more than my fair share of courage, I stepped to the window and peeked out through the curtain. My initial reaction was pure joy as I no longer saw the monster in the tree line. I began chuckling to myself for the prank my mind had played on me and making all sorts of excuses for what the apparition was. The smile fell from my face when I saw it standing in the middle of the field. Not only was it far beyond the horror my imagination had presented, but it was a good 20 yards closer to my house. The nightmare stood easily 8 feet tall and had a massive rack of horns that went straight out in either direction at least 3 feet. What I could see of it was skeletal. There was no skin at all, except for the cloak that was draped over its shoulders and fell to mid-calf. The cloak looked rough, like it had been made from the skins of other animals. Those unholy empty eye sockets were staring straight at me. I froze as terror gripped me and squeezed every ounce of fluid out of my bladder. It took a step towards me, then another. I knew there was no way I'd make it across the driveway to my car before it caught me and tore me to pieces. My mind started throwing out anything and everything it could. Call someone was the most plausible. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Came the wonderful sound of rescue. I'm being stalked by something, I said. Something? Or do you mean someone? No, it's definitely something. Okay, describe this something for me. I gave the best description I could of the monster, not daring to look out the window for confirmation of my details. Uh-huh, the operator said. Well, give me your address and I'll send over a cryptid hunter as soon as possible. Oh, okay, my address is... The line disconnected. Hello, I said desperately. I tried calling back, but it just kept ringing. Hiding didn't seem to be an option. It was obvious from the animal skins it wore that this thing was a good hunter. I assumed that meant it had a good sense of smell and would be able to sniff me out of any hiding place in my house. My next option was to leave. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my car keys, hoping to slip out unnoticed. Those hopes were dashed when I looked out and saw the monster walking up my driveway. I ducked behind the door, eyes darting all around, looking for anywhere to hide. To this day, I don't know why, but I ran to the drawers and grabbed a butcher knife. What good it was going to do against a monster that was entirely bones was beyond me, but I wasn't exactly calmly thinking my options through at the moment. The first crash splintered my outside door. The second crash destroyed it. The monster ducked its head and stepped inside my mudroom, staring at me. I had 3 options. Run to the living room, go upstairs, or down to the basement. I have no idea why I sprinted toward the basement door. I shut and locked it behind me as the inside door broke into pieces. Making my way down the steps as quickly and quietly as possible, I listened to the floorboards creak above me. Looking around the semi-finished basement with just enough room to stand if I ducked my head, I quickly discovered that there were no clear-cut hiding places. The footsteps above slowly made their way back to the living room, then up the stairs. For a brief fleeting moment, I thought about going back up to the kitchen when the basement door flung open. The steps groaned under the weight of the monster and I was overwhelmed by the stench of death. I ran back the short hallway toward the outside cellar door, but I knew it was too heavy for me to open from the inside. Standing there, helpless like a deer in headlights, the oil furnace kicked on. It had been a nice day, but the furnace still kicked on from time to time to keep the temperature where it was set at. It didn't run for more than a minute before turning off. The oil tank sat beside the furnace, with both of them set a short space away from the wall. I dashed over behind the furnace and tried to stuff myself between it and the wall, making myself as small as possible in hopes that it might not see me. It wasn't long before I heard the scrape of bone on the concrete floor getting closer. My life expectancy had shrunk to a matter of seconds. I wondered if anyone would ever know how I met my gruesome end, or would my story be a mystery, an urban legend like so many others that live near forested areas and suddenly disappear, never to be seen or heard from again. The sniffing was my death knell. It drew closer as the horns appeared in front of me. My only advantage was the horns couldn't fit between the oil tank and the furnace. I celebrated a small victory that this hellish monster would at least have to put forth some effort in order to get me. It struggled to reach behind the furnace, almost reaching me. The only thing that stopped it was leaning against the furnace and drawing back as it cried out in pain from the heat. Realizing my hiding place was compromised, I darted behind the oil tank, hoping the bulk of the tank would hinder it. I scooched as far as I could into the corner. There was only a small clearance between the tank and the wall, maybe a foot. I knew it couldn't get in here, but that didn't mean it couldn't reach me. Its arms were incredibly long. I watched as it seemed to be confused as to where I'd gone. The sniffing started again as it tried to locate me, but it seemed to be having problems. The fill pipe for the oil tank had a small leak. I'd wrapped rags around it, but there was still some oil in the rags. It seemed like the smell was throwing it off. For one brief moment, I saw it take a few steps away from me in my hiding place. It seemed like by some miracle I might be saved. It turned back toward the steps and seemed like it was leaving. I breathed a sigh of relief. Just then it stopped, turned, and came straight toward the oil tank. It slammed its bulk against the tank, making the metal groan from the stress. It backed up and slammed into it again. This time I could see the metal bracket that was bolted into the cement to keep the tank in place start to bend. I didn't think such a thing was possible, but after the third slam, the bolt broke. The tank teetered precariously toward the furnace. One more slam and the front bracket broke. The tank listed on its side, falling in slow motion toward the furnace. As the tank fell, the intake pipe broke loose. There was now an opening at the top of the tank that was slowly falling toward the furnace. Halfway down, heating oil began splashing out of the opening. The monster didn't seem to care. It had caught sight of me and was pushing the tank down to get to me. I had to stand, or the tank would crush my leg. As soon as I did, it let out the most ungodly roar. If I hadn't soiled myself earlier, I would then. I was stuck. It was checkmate. I was trapped in a corner, with an oil tank and furnace blocking my way on one side, and a murderous unholy abomination on the other. As the tank came to rest against the furnace, it ripped off the side, exposing part of the firebox. Somehow, I discovered another horrible way to die. The oil was dripping down the side of the furnace and into the firebox. The intermittent nature of the oil furnace had kept me safe for the moment, as it wasn't currently running. But it was only a matter of time. The oil dripping out of the tank was making an ever-expanding puddle on the floor. I tiptoed further into the corner to stay away from it, but the monster was climbing over the tank and was almost able to reach me. It didn't matter what I did, I was about to die. Its skeletal fingers brushed my shoulder, trying to get a grip. In sheer panic and desperation, I did the strangest thing I think I've ever done. I took the knife that I'd carried with me from the kitchen, shoved it through the arm bones of the monster, and then straight up with every ounce of strength into the ceiling. To my great joy, the knife buried itself in the space between the wooden boards and stuck. The monster squealed and pulled back on the offending appendage, causing more damage but not breaking free. In my moment of triumph, the most unexpected and wonderful thing happened. The oil furnace kicked on. I watched in fascination as the oil that the monster was standing in ignited. The flames quickly engulfed it as it squealed in pain. I scrambled over the downed tank as the fire came towards me. Just before I hit the concrete floor, the monster reached out to grab me. My side was instantly on fire, and for the briefest of moments, I thought it had me, but instead it tore a gash in my side. I didn't bother to look down at the damage, just ran up the stairs and out the door, not stopping until I was in the car and speeding down the road. When I finally got my breathing under control, I pondered where I was going, aside from away from certain death. I reached down and touched my side, pulling away with a hand covered in blood. It seemed like my destination was set for me. The hospital it was. Being 20 minutes away from the nearest town, I wondered if the monster had killed me anyway. Bleeding to death would be better than being eaten, but I'd still be just as dead. Around 10 minutes into my trip, I saw flashing lights heading towards me and heard the siren of the fire truck as it sped past, heading up the hill. I assumed they were going to extinguish my house and hoped that the monster was already dead. The thought of it killing unsuspecting firemen almost made me turn around to go warn them, but I knew I'd never catch up with them, and if I tried, it would possibly be the last thing I ever did. The thought of losing all the things I'd collected over the course of my life saddened me, but being alive to feel the sadness was its own reward. The worst part of knowing that I would never go near that house again was I'd miss my trees. The security business. Before I was even 18 years old, I already knew how ridiculous this business was. I knew because my dad used to take me to work with him even though he wasn't supposed to. Every single day he used to hide me in the back of his car. Frankly, however, it was not that intense as I imagined it to be. The first time he took me was back in 2020 during the height of COVID and quarantine, although he started working at this particular site back in 2019. I won't say where this was, but it was a big property divided among multiple security guards. My dad's section was entirely made up of offices with a dirt lot next to us, since it was the edge of the entire property. And man, this site was so dramatic and ridiculous. If you had to categorize this site as a genre, I could call this drama, romance, crime, mystery, sci-fi. We even saw UFOs, paranormal, etc., fucking etc. Crime. When my dad started to take me, he told me stories about one of his co-workers when he first started working there. Let's call him Vane, the things he would do. My dad said, one of the office people called the property manager saying that his door lock was changed and that he had to break the door down to work. The property manager then called my boss. We would later find out that Vane changed the locks and store his guns and ammo and would just every night after his shift take them back with him. Didn't your boss say anything to the property manager? I asked. No, he said so boldly. Why not? Because he's also shady. My dad would go on further on how annoying he was. He would ultimately complain to his boss, let's call him Isaac, and ask him to never have Vane as a co-worker ever again. My boss, after all the shady shit he would find out about this guy Vane, would still not fire him, but finally just moved him to another site. I later found out he got caught doing the same shit again. I would not be surprised if Isaac still hasn't fired him. Paranormal. One time I was patrolling. In the middle of it, I saw in the middle of the parking lot something horizontal. There was no light or anything. All I could see was a silhouette of something. It kind of looked like a pole. As I got closer to see what it was, and closer, suddenly as if it sensed me, turned to face me. It scared the shit out of me, but somehow I didn't make a noise besides stepping back a little. It was a man, but the way he looked, it would be understandable if he was homeless, but his clothes looked normal. Not only that, his smell was demonic. It was literally demonic. I set aside his description and then just told him, "You can't be here." He said nothing, but I just walked away, hoping when I get back he'd be gone. I was a little distance away from where I was, and suddenly I hear sprinting and stomping coming towards me. I turn around and pull out my pepper spray, but he just stopped and stares at me. "Better get the fuck on," I said while making sure he sees me shake the pepper spray. I walked away again, but this time facing him, and nothing happened afterwards. I came back and he was gone. UFOs. Every day after everyone was gone, my dad would freely let me out of the car. Not to just fuck around or anything, merely to stretch and just stand while still making sure no one sees me just in case. We were talking in the middle of the night when I suddenly look up and see a blinking light. I know what this sounds like. A blinking light would mean a plane. But no, because it was low enough for us to be able to hear sounds of a plane, but it made no sound. It was low enough that we were able to make out its shape. Believe us when we say it straight up looked like that spaceship from the movie Aliens 2. I pulled out my phone right after I did. It turns. The sky was clear, but in the middle of it was this lonely small cloud, where the ship or whatever started flying towards it. As soon as it went either behind it or inside it, whatever the case, we never saw it again. Conclusion. These stories don't directly relate to how this industry works, but they taught me the amount of possibilities in it and how it is. There were times when my dad was arguing with his coworkers, for example, and I would just be ducking in the back seat, listening to the stupidity of his coworkers' arguments, and the utter shadiness of his bosses. Not all of them, just a couple. Altogether just seemed like a kind of industry you should not be in, because being a security guard requires nothing. Literally nothing. Isaac was straight up Patrick Bateman, just less psychotic, more like thuggish, at least I hope so. Again, I can't say where this took place, but it was somewhere in California. My dad most likely wouldn't approve of me talking about this, but oh well. I learned this. Being a security guard should be one of those last resort jobs. Never touch the negative spacemen in Fishlake National. Not sure how this will be received, but I gotta get this out there in case anyone is thinking about doing what I did. And that would be going hunting in Utah's Fishlake National Park, alone, at night. Okay, so first off, please don't DM me. I know it's illegal in 1,000 different ways. Hunting at night, check. Trespassing on private property, check, check. In fact, I'm pretty sure using thermal goggles to hunt deer is also outlawed, but don't quote me on that. It was about the thrill, that feeling of doing something I wasn't supposed to. The freedom of standing under the stars in the middle of nowhere, untethered from rules and expectations. It's the same force that gets graffiti artists sneaking down highway on ramps and teens knocking over mailboxes on a Saturday night. In a way, doing something illegal is the definition of freedom. But before last week, I honestly didn't give a fuck. I'm not a poacher or trying to bag some trophy buck while he's sleeping. I mean, snagging a wall hanger would be sweet. Don't get me wrong, but that wasn't what got me behind the wheel. 1:15 midnight 2 Sundays back, making my way from Park City to the heart of the wilderness. But that's not really the fuck up. It wasn't like I got found out. The fuck up is what I found. I don't care how many no trespassing signs they had up. You don't got a locked gate, or at least a guard on duty, and you're basically begging me to come in and play. Punishable by up to 3 years in prison wasn't gonna sway me either. On the drive out, I was figuring I'd have to park my Jeep far from the border fence. But on a hunch, I decided to get right up close to the guard station along the Joseph Mountain Road entrance. And wouldn't you know it, the goddamn gate arm wasn't even down. Wasn't until I was about 10 minutes into the pitch-black wilderness that my heart started to pump. Seeing the world of trees and brush materialize in my headlights got me a bit keyed up. Kept thinking I'd see something pop into those high beams at any moment. Anyone who's been knows the park is goddamn massive. Nobody was gonna notice me skulking around for a few hours. But nothing did. I was truly alone out there. I pulled the Jeep into a dirt shoulder and killed the engine. Felt like I'd turned off the world. If not for the stars above, I might thought I'd gone and died. Couldn't be dead though, because I felt more alive than ever. Felt fucking good. Brought a basic Remington 700, which I slung over my shoulder with my hunting pack, and my thermals hanging around my neck. I clicked on my maglite and jumped from my car. Threw a pin down in Google Maps, so I wouldn't be searching for the Jeep later. The night was unnervingly quiet. Figured on that familiar chorus of crickets shrieking or at least some nocturnal animal activity. But no, pure silence around me. Not even a breeze to rustle the evergreens. I tend to lean more to the get drunk in a blind kind of hunter. Used to have a bumper sticker on my old 4X4 that said the worst day hunting still beats the best day doing anything else. I know, don't get on me. I was 24 at the time. Point is, this was real fucking hunting. Had to pull out all my Eagle Scout training for this shit. Only sound in the world was the crunch of my boots through the underbrush. I hiked about a mile into the woods with my maglite combing the ground before I started finding signs of game. A few broken branches, hoof prints in the soft earth. Felt exhilarating. Middle of nowhere, I felt like I was getting close. Found a print that couldn't have been more than an hour old, and heard some activity beyond the reach of my light. Skin was tingling. Figured this was the time. So I clicked off the light, let the black void wash over me. My eyes adjusted. The stars above came into focus. I listened. Nothing. So I slung the thermal goggles on, strapped that elastic band across the back of my head. They hummed nice and soft as they powered up, and just like that, my entire world faded up from black to shades of icy blue. A cold, serene expanse. The entire forest stretched out before me, but no goddamn heat signatures. I scanned the area, looking for any hint of warm color, but there was nothing. No deer, no raccoons, not even a goddamn squirrel. Couldn't believe it. Figured I'd have at least a few animals hiding around me in the dark, but I was truly alone. But just then, I saw it. At first I thought the goggles were glitching. 50 feet away there was a man, or at least through the goggles it looked like a man. Except it wasn't that standard infrared mix of red, orange, and yellow. Even still, I didn't believe it, because I couldn't shake this feeling in my gut. No, it was completely black against the blue surroundings. Not warm, not even cold. To be that dark, that thing had to be sub-fucking-zero. Like a void carved from the landscape, a negative space. At first, I didn't know how to react. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. I stood dead still, at least a minute, just staring. I felt my blood rise into my face with each passing second as I slowly realized how impossible this thing was. The rational part of me said it had to be a trick of the goggles, some kind of interference or weather phenomenon, like a pocket of chill or something. Makes no sense, but that was the best I could come up with. That it was watching me. After an eternity of that staring contest, I finally yanked the goggles off and flipped on my mag light. I pointed it right toward the spot where it stood, but there was nothing there. Just trees, foliage, and the infinite black night beyond. My stomach told me to just get the fuck out of there, but I had to double check what I saw. Flashlight off again. I put the goggles on. They were still humming as the world went indigo. Just then, my heart jumped into my throat, and there it was. Still standing exactly where it had been before, still staring, just like when an animal catches you looking at it and freezes, on edge, deciding if it needs to book it or not. My current research project into dark energy has hit a snag. No, I do not mean dark energy as in spooky energy or eldritch energy or any other sci-fi mumbo-jumbo bullcrap out there. Dark energy is theorized to be the largest form of energy that exists in this universe. It makes up roughly 68% of the total energy here in this universe, as of now. It is so powerful that it causes the universe to expand at an accelerating rate. That's right, the universe does not expand at a constant rate. How cool is that? Well, I must be careful. I am a scientist, so we always have to take everything with some degree of uncertainty, and the topic of dark energy is no different. Especially since the evidence for dark energy that we currently have are indirect observations from the cosmos. Now, before I tell you about the snag that I encountered, I must inform you that everything coming out of my mouth is confidential. You must swear to your god or various gods that you will never tell a soul about it, otherwise, well, you know. On top of that, my supervisor has forbidden me from disclosing any technical details about the experiment, only the aftermath of the problem. So, I will only be referring to this experiment as Operation Dark Radar. With that out of the way, I can describe to you at a high level what Operation Dark Radar is all about. Operation Dark Radar was our ambitious attempt to directly detect and measure dark energy. We have developed a sophisticated array of instruments designed to capture the faintest signals that might indicate the presence of dark energy. Our goal is to understand its properties and behavior, and ultimately to unlock its secrets. In short, we have two questions that we want answered. What the hell is dark energy, and why does it exist? The superiors, on the other hand, want another question answered. How can we harness and use dark energy? This should be sufficient for you to understand what Operation Dark Radar is all about. Now, I will describe to you the lab, again at a high level. The facility is huge and located 2.3 kilometers underground. This serves several purposes. The first one is to shield our instruments from external radiation emitted from human-made sources. For example, we want to limit radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays, and other forms of radiation produced in cities from affecting our instruments. Secondly, we don't want the public to find out. None of that pseudo-scientific journalism sensationalizing this important research. We also don't want foreign or domestic actors stealing or interfering with our research. And last, but certainly my favorite, we need to monitor the equipment 24/7. That's right, we get to live here, like mole people. I know many people here hate that, but I love it. The day-to-day, what's that like? The equipment needs to be checked every 30 minutes, as even a temperature change of a single degree Celsius will ruin everything and cause a 24-hour downtime just to get everything back to optimum levels. And the temperatures we are reaching are near zero, close to 10 degrees Kelvin or minus 263.15 degrees Celsius. So myself, Christoph, Hamel, Erica, Sabrina, and Arnold rotate between shifts to monitor the system. Christoph and I monitor the morning shifts between 0 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Hamel and Erica monitor the system between 8 o'clock and 16 o'clock. And Sabrina and Arnold monitor the system between 16 o'clock and 0 o'clock. Monitoring procedures are pretty standard, you know. Check temperature, check electronics, check the controlled measurements, match calibration. After that, we can finally check the equipment to see if it has picked up any anomalies. For us to be sure that the measurements are meaningful, we need to ensure that the confidential metric is 6 standard deviations away from the baseline. My apologies. I see that you are anxious and want to know more about it, but I am afraid that this technical detail is on a need-to-know basis. Every so often, our equipment picks up massive events in the universe. Do you recall the massive gamma ray burst that hit Earth on October 9, 2022? It was one of the brightest events of all time, if not the brightest. And no, it wasn't because of the gamma rays. They cannot penetrate 2.3 kilometers into the Earth. The collapse of the star that caused that massive burst also emitted both neutrinos and gravitational waves, which dark radar can detect. Unfortunately, due to the sensitivity of our equipment, everything got destabilized. It took us at least a week to return everything back to normal. This is as far as I am willing to go in terms of day-to-day details. Both of our lives are on the line in terms of what information we exchange here today. But to be honest, only yours is truly at risk. Let's move on to the problem we encountered a week ago, March 16, 2025. Christoph and I were in charge of monitoring the tools in the morning. Precisely at 3:18, our equipment detected an extremely powerful anomaly. We were afraid of our equipment destabilizing, so we put the lab on high alert and woke everyone up. Terika and Arnold checked the internet using a secured computer with several layers of security. They found nothing from the public that could explain our equipment issues. Sabrina and Hamel ran diagnostic scans on the equipment to ensure that everything was stable. Sure enough, the equipment's temperature was stable, and the controlled measurements did not deviate from the calibration. Christoph was manning the classified metric monitoring while I was checking the radar component to determine approximately where the anomaly occurred. After the initial radar scan, I had to check again. I found that the anomaly occurred inside the lab. After running this scan maybe 5-6 times, it was all consistent. It was right here in this lab. Looking at the screen, it appeared very small. Christoph checked the metrics and found that this thing, whatever it was emitting power at roughly the same amount as the collapse of a star that emitted that massive gamma ray burst back on October 9, 2022. This was when we called headquarters, notifying them of our findings. They decided to send a huge detachment of security and technicians to help protect the equipment. Within 15 minutes, a detachment of 20 soldiers arrived, along with 17 technicians. Within 1 hour of receiving the detachment, there was an incident with one of the security teams. At the northwest corner of the lab, we heard loud screams. And it wasn't just the typical screams of fear you hear in the movies. It was horrible. They sounded as if they were in a tremendous amount of pain. On top of that, we also heard the sounds of bones snapping and cracking. The strangest part was that the screams would gradually rise to a higher pitch, then silence. We, as in the research team, all 6 of us, including myself, could hear the security leader use the radio to inquire a report from Team Epsilon. We only heard silence as a response. This was when he ordered an evacuation of the facility. I could see why the leader was promoted to his position. I think his name was Andrew. Stubborn, he demanded that this facility be secured, and he needed to send his soldiers to investigate. Andrew replied to my demand, stating that further casualties must be avoided and that at least the equipment can be replaced, but good people cannot. Thinking about it now, I was a fool, but a lucky fool. He was gathering everyone to go up the huge service elevator to make it to a safe place in the security headquarters near the surface. However, I decided to grab the handgun on the corner of the monitoring table while no one was looking, and I snuck away from the group. My goal? Well, I guess at the time it was to look for this thing, kill it, and secure my lab. Like I said, I was a fool. But lucky though. Sadly, 5 minutes after sneaking off, I could see everyone on the elevator going up. However, I saw this black thing forming at the ceiling of the elevator just above Andrew's head. Black is not the right word. While I was looking at this thing form, it looked like it was sucking all color around it. So I think the correct thing to say is the lack of color rather than black, as that's what it looked like to me. That's when I could see everyone in the elevator appear to slowly get sucked into this thing. The best way to describe this is the effects of an object going into a black hole. As they were drawn closer, their bodies began to stretch and elongate, a process known as spaghettification, caused by the intense tidal forces. Limbs and torsos extended grotesquely, their forms becoming thin and distorted as if they were being pulled apart like strands of spaghetti. They crossed what seemed like an event horizon, the boundary beyond which nothing can escape. The light around them started to shift to a deep red, a gravitational redshift, making them appear dimmer and more distant. Their screams appear to fade while their pitch appears to increase, swallowed by the darkness. As they were sucked into this black hole-like phenomenon, time itself seemed to slow down for them, a phenomenon known as time dilation, until they appeared to freeze in place. Finally, they were pulled towards the center, where the gravitational forces were infinitely strong, crushing them into an infinitely small point, much like the singularity at the heart of a black hole. Their bodies compressed into a singularity, an unfathomable point of infinite density, where the known laws of physics ceased to exist. I won't go further into the gory details. After viewing this horrible thing for roughly 5 minutes, I decided to turn around and hide. I dropped the gun and hid under my desk, trying to use my chair to conceal my body. It must have felt like an hour or so of sheer silence after the entire team's death. I was contemplating what to do next. That's when I saw the table in front of me slowly start to lose color. The vibrant hues drained away, leaving behind a dull, lifeless gray. Then I saw this thing made out of a lack of color walk through it towards me. It was as if the very essence of color was being consumed by its presence, creating a void that seemed to absorb all light and life around it. It looked human, but there was something profoundly unsettling about its appearance. Its entire body was made out of a lack of color. It had arms and legs, but they were smooth and featureless, devoid of any distinguishing marks or textures. There were no fingers or toes, just blunt, rounded ends where they should have been. Its head was equally featureless. No hair, no eyes, no ears, no mouth, nothing. It was as if someone had sculpted a human form out of pure darkness, erasing all traces of individuality and expression. As it moved closer, the air around it seemed to grow colder. It stopped a few meters in front of me. Then it pointed towards me with one of its featureless limbs. I wanted to run, but instead I left my hiding place and stood still. I knew there was no way to escape this thing. All I could do was wait and accept my fate. I started to receive visions in my head. It appeared as if it was showing me a civilization made of the void. It was a realm of emptiness, where light and color were swallowed by an all-encompassing darkness. The beings that inhabited this place were shadows, entities formed from the very essence of the void. They were not humanoid. Their shapes were fluid and ever-changing, shifting between forms that defied comprehension. They moved with an eerie grace, reminiscent of laminar flow or water flow without turbulence. It walked around the lab, inspecting the equipment. Well, walk is not the correct word, more like moved or flowed. Its movements were fluid and seamless, as if it were gliding through the air. That's when it sent me another set of visions. In these visions, I saw how our equipment had somehow managed to make a connection between Earth and the void world. It was as if a beacon of light had pierced through the impenetrable darkness, creating a bridge between our reality and theirs. The instruments, designed to detect the faintest signals of dark energy, had inadvertently tapped into the fabric of the void, opening a gateway to this shadowy realm. This thing, this entity made of the void, was an emissary of sorts. It had crossed over through the connection we had established, drawn to the light that had penetrated its world. It moved with purpose, inspecting the equipment and the staff that had facilitated its arrival. Then, the next set of visions flooded my mind. I saw the fate of my colleagues, their demise a result of their unworthiness. The emissary had judged them, finding them lacking in the qualities necessary to continue the experiment and strengthen the connection between our worlds. Their screams and suffering were a testament to their failure to meet the standards of the void. In stark contrast, I saw myself in these visions, singled out as the only one worthy of continuing this experiment. The emissary conveyed a sense of purpose and expectation, indicating that I possessed the qualities needed to bridge the gap between Earth and the void. It was a heavy burden, but also a strange honor. I was chosen to strengthen the connection, to delve deeper into the mysteries of dark energy and the shadowy realm it inhabited. As the visions faded, the emissary's presence loomed over me. I knew right then and there what needs to be done. I didn't care about my survival at that point, only to continue where I left off. I bowed to it as gesture of goodwill, indicating to it that I agreed to its request. However, it seemed like it wanted further assurance from me. It wanted to show me the price of failure. Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming force pulling me towards the entity. The room around me distorted, and I was drawn into a vortex of darkness. I experienced the black hole phenomenon firsthand. My body began to stretch and elongate, the intense tidal forces causing a sensation of being pulled apart. The pain was excruciating, unlike anything I had ever felt. As I was drawn closer, I crossed what seemed like an event horizon. The light around me shifted to a deep red, and my screams were swallowed by the void. Time itself seemed to slow down, each moment stretching into an eternity of agony. I felt myself being compressed, crushed towards an infinitely small point, the singularity at the heart of this dark realm. As I felt myself being compressed towards the singularity, the pain and terror reached an unbearable peak. Just when I thought I could endure no more, the process began to reverse. The crushing force started to relent, and I felt my body slowly decompressing. The intense tidal forces that had stretched and elongated me began to ease, allowing my form to return to its normal shape. The darkness that had enveloped me started to recede, and the deep red light shifted back to its original hue. Time, which had seemed to stretch into an eternity, began to flow normally again. My screams, swallowed by the void, faded into silence as the vortex of darkness released its grip on me. I found myself standing in the lab once more, right in front of it, just as before. The room around me returned to its familiar state, the equipment and surroundings no longer distorted by the black hole phenomenon. It didn't need to do that. I was already a scientist, driven by discovery, not by greed. But this nightmare it showed me made me realize how powerful this thing was. It was able to suck me into a black hole, never to be seen again, in the most painful way possible. And it was able to somehow reverse that process, perhaps reverse time itself. It was truly horrifying and fascinating. But throughout this entire process, I respected it, not just feared it. After that, it disappeared. But it did not leave. Oh no, it is now one with this world. This left me with one thing to finish what I started. Thinking about this now, I realized that there were so many people holding me back. My research team had a secret agenda that they tried to hide from me, driven by greed. The higher-ups, too, kept me back, reducing my funding and only limiting me in areas where profit could be made. This is not science. This is some sick, twisted perversion of it. This cannot stand. Oh right, I digressed. By the way, have you noticed how personnel have suddenly disappeared, including the higher-ups and executives? Well, you know who to thank. Now that you've heard this story, I need you to take care of this company. You see, I do not have time for this, and I need someone to do it. Someone to oversee the equipment procurement and staff replacement. You have been chosen. Are you up to it? If you are, great. Welcome aboard. If not, too bad. You don't believe me? Well, turn around. The reflection that moved first. I noticed it for the first time while brushing my teeth. It was just a split second, a trick of the eye, I told myself. My reflection blinked. Before I did, I froze, toothbrush hanging from my mouth, foam dribbling onto my chin. The mirror version of me stood there, staring back, as if nothing had happened. I chuckled nervously and shook my head. I was just tired. That's what I told myself. But then it happened again, and again. At first it was small things. A blink, a smirk that lingered a second too long, a slight tilt of the head as if the reflection were listening to something I couldn't hear. One night I decided to test it. I raised my hand, wiggling my fingers, watching the mirror carefully, perfect synchronization. Then, heart pounding, I moved my hand slower, drawing out the movement. Halfway up, my reflection twitched, and then snapped into place, catching up as if it had lagged behind. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the sink. My reflection did not. It stood there, unmoving, grinning at me. I turned off the light and left the bathroom, refusing to look back. By the next day, I had convinced myself I was imagining things. Stress, lack of sleep, that was all. But I couldn't shake the unease that crawled under my skin every time I passed a reflective surface. Windows, storefront glass, my phone screen. I swore I saw something off, a flicker of motion that didn't match my own. Then, last night, it changed. I woke up around 3 a.m., throat dry, craving water. I shuffled out of bed, heading for the kitchen. The hallway was dim, my body moving on autopilot, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. My reflection. Not in a mirror, not in glass. Standing in the darkness of my bedroom doorway. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, but I knew what it was. I bolted for the light switch. The bulb flickered, then steadied, flooding the room with warmth. There was nothing there, but my bedroom mirror was fogged up as if something had just stepped through it. I barely slept after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined it standing over me, waiting. I started avoiding mirrors altogether. I even draped a sheet over the one in my bedroom, but it didn't help. Tonight, as I lay in bed, my phone screen lit up on its own. A notification popped up. Come back to the mirror. My breath hitched. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, but before I could touch it, the screen went black. I heard something shift in the darkness. A faint, slow creak of the closet door easing open. I don't want to look, but I know it's already watching me. Then, something cold brushes against my ankle. I yank the covers over my head, heart pounding. My breathing is too loud, too fast. My fingers dig into the sheets as I try to convince myself it's nothing. But I hear it whisper now, a voice that sounds exactly like mine. Let me in. I squeeze my eyes shut. This isn't real. It can't be real. Then I hear the sound of glass cracking. Not just a small crack, a deep splintering shatter. Slowly I lower the blanket and force myself to look. The mirror across the room is still covered with the sheet, but the outline of something pressing against it is unmistakable. A shape. My shape. A handprint pushes outward from beneath the fabric, distorting it, stretching it. I scramble backward, pressing myself against the headboard. The whispering gets louder, more urgent. Let me in. And then the worst part. The handprint moves, crawling down the mirror like a spider, reaching for the floor. The sheet suddenly falls to the ground. The mirror is empty. I am no longer in it. And behind me I hear footsteps. I whip around, heart pounding, and come face to face with myself. Not my reflection. Me. Only it isn't. Its grin is too wide, its eyes too dark, swirling like deep, endless pools of ink. It cocks its head, studying me, its fingers twitching like it's getting used to them. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. My body refuses to move. Finally it sighs, stretching as if it has been trapped for centuries. You have no idea how long I've waited for this. I stumble backward, but my feet don't feel like they belong to me anymore. My vision wavers like looking through water. The world around me blurs, distorting, pulling me in. I turn toward the mirror, and the truth crashes over me like a tidal wave. I'm inside it now. Trapped. I slam my fists against the glass, but the thing wearing my face only laughs. Stepping away from the mirror, my body no longer mine. I scream, but no one can hear me. The last thing I see before the mirror turns black, before my prison seals shut, is my own stolen body walking out the door. And then I am alone. Forever. The Watcher's Seat. 3 years ago, I found a job listing that intrigued me. Night watchman needed. Excellent pay. No experience necessary. Discretion required. The ad had no company name, no contact info beyond an email address. I was between jobs, desperate, and curious enough to apply. The response came fast. A single-line email with an address, a time, and the instruction arrive alone. The building was a nondescript warehouse on the edge of town, surrounded by nothing but dead grass and cracked pavement. Inside, a man in a gray suit greeted me. He didn't introduce himself. He just handed me a contract with thick black lines through most of the text. He then tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey kiddo, sign here if you want the job." The pay was obscene, $75 an hour for 6-hour shifts, 5 nights a week. I didn't ask questions. I signed. The job was simple. Sit in a small windowless room with a single monitor displaying a live feed. Once an hour, type a brief log about what I saw. That was it. No cameras in my room, no visitors, no talking. A red button on the desk labeled Alert was my only means of communication with the outside world. The first night I watched a white room, sterile, brightly lit. In the center sat a wooden chair, and in that chair sat a man. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react to anything. He just stared forward, unblinking. I logged it, subject seated, no movement. Every night was the same. He never moved, never ate, never slept, just sat. By the 3rd week, I convinced myself he was a dummy, a prop, some weird experiment. But then one night, at exactly 3:33 a.m., he smiled. It was small, subtle, just a flicker of movement at the corner of his mouth. But I saw it. I was sure of it. I hesitated before typing my log. Subject seated. Minimal movement. Possible facial expression change. The next night, his eyes moved. Not much, just a slight flick toward the camera. Toward me. I hit the red button. Seconds later, a reply appeared on my screen. Maintain observation. Log activity. Do not interact. I wanted to quit, but the money was too good, so I stayed. The nights dragged on. He moved more. His head tilted. His fingers twitched. And every time I reported it, and the response was always the same. Maintain observation. Log activity. Do not interact. Then one night, he stood up. I stared, heart hammering. He shouldn't be able to do that. He had sat there motionless, for over a month. I hit the red button. The response was instant. Maintain observation, log activity, do not interact. I watched, frozen, as he took one step forward, then another. His eyes locked onto mine through the screen. I couldn't breathe. He grinned. Then the feed cut to black. The door behind me clicked open. I turned slowly. The chair from the white room was now in the center of my observation room. Empty, waiting. A new message appeared on my monitor. Please take your seat. I didn't move. My entire body screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to work. The door was still open, but the hallway beyond was pitch black. I had never seen the hallway dark before. It was always lit, sterile, like the room on the monitor. Another message blinked onto the screen. Take your seat, Jacob. They knew my name. The man on the monitor had never moved like this before, never acknowledged me. But now he was gone, and the chair was here. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I was about to make a run for it when the monitor flickered back on. It wasn't the white room anymore. It was my observation room. I saw myself on the screen, standing in the corner, staring in horror. And behind me, the man. He was right there, inches away, his grin stretched wider than should be humanly possible. The screen cut to black again. The lights flickered. And then I felt breath on my neck. I spun around, but the room was empty. My pulse pounded in my ears. The monitor flickered back on. The camera feed showed the white room again. The chair was no longer empty. I was sitting in it. My breath caught in my throat. No, that wasn't possible. I was standing right here. The figure in the chair slowly lifted its head. My head, my eyes, my face. It grinned, wider and wider until its skin cracked. A new message appeared on the monitor. Observation complete. Subject transfer successful. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My fingers tingled. My vision swam. The screen flashed one final message before the world around me faded into blinding white. Welcome to your new position, Jacob. And being eaten alive, I was peacefully taking a shower when I noticed something strange. The side of my upper thigh was bleeding, but it wasn't just a cut. It was worse, far worse. I leaned in closer, my hand shaking as I touched the skin. A deep, jagged hole, like something had torn through the flesh, leaving a raw, exposed wound. The edges weren't smooth. They were shredded, as if they had been gnawed or ripped apart. The skin around the hole was a sickly shade of pale, almost white, like it had been drained of color, and blood pooled around the edges, dark and viscous. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The pain was sharp but distant, like it didn't quite belong to me, like it was something I should felt earlier but hadn't. I pressed my fingers into the hole, feeling the raw, soft tissue slick with blood. The water from the shower kept flowing, turning a disturbing shade of red as it mingled with the blood on the floor. The scene felt almost unreal, like I was standing outside of myself watching this horror unfold. I tried to pull my hand away, but my fingers were sticky with blood, clinging to the wound as if it didn't want to let me go. A wave of nausea hit me, my stomach turning, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gruesome sight. It wasn't right. This wasn't just an injury. This wasn't something that could happen by accident. I couldn't remember how it had happened, why it was happening, but the reality of it, the visceral horror of seeing my own flesh torn open like that, was impossible to deny. I stumbled back, my head spinning, feeling dizzy and disoriented. The cold water continued to run, mixing with the blood on the floor, but it did nothing to calm the rising panic that was choking me. My hand trembled as I reached for the towel, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't just bleeding. I was being consumed by something darker than I could understand. I could see his skin lose color, his face going pale, as if the blood had drained from him. His lips trembled, but his eyes were wide with panic. I could hear his breath getting shallow, his heart hammering so loudly it seemed to echo in the room. I watched him stumble back, as if the sight of me was too much, too real. His hands shook as he gently moved me, trying to wrap me in a towel. As I was processing what had happened, I screamed for my husband Steve, who quickly came running to help me. "What happened?" Steve asked, his voice cracking as his eyes fell on the huge wound on my body. He wasn't speaking anymore, just moving mechanically as if he were on autopilot. His touch was cold, too cold for comfort, and I felt a strange distance between us, like I was drifting away from him. I couldn't help but wonder, was this real? Was this really happening? As Steve dressed me and hurriedly got me into the car to take me to the doctors, my 7-year-old son, Tommy, walked into the room. His small feet made almost no sound on the floor, and I didn't even realize he had entered until I saw him standing there, staring at me with wide, curious eyes. Tommy saw the wound. His eyes flicked over it briefly, but his expression didn't change. He didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. It was as if he was seeing something as normal as a scraped knee. No fear, no confusion, no concern. He didn't ask questions, didn't show a hint of worry. He just stood there, his hands casually clasped in front of him like he was watching me as if nothing unusual was happening. His reaction, or lack of, haunts me to this day. It was almost as if he'd seen something like this before. It should have terrified me, the way he acted, how calm and detached he was. But it wasn't the wound that left me shaken. It was the cold emptiness in his eyes, the fact that he didn't even think it was strange. As I got to the hospital, the nurse who saw my wound looked confused, but also strangely intrigued. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered, still dazed. "I didn't even notice the wound until I took a shower." She frowned, her eyes narrowing as she examined me more closely. "You didn't notice something like that?" She shook her head, her expression turning from concern to doubt. "This isn't just a simple injury, this looks unusual." After a long pause, she finally spoke again. "The wound, it looks like a laceration, but it's deep, and the edges are ragged, like something with a sharp, serrated edge tore through your skin. It could be an animal bite, or maybe something mechanical." Her voice trailed off, as though she was unsure herself. I couldn't understand what she meant, but the way she looked at the wound made my skin crawl. She cleaned it gently, her hands moving with care, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. She seemed almost fascinated, like this was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve. An animal bite? My mind raced. I couldn't remember anything. No animal, no sharp object, nothing. It felt like a bad dream, but I was awake, and the wound was real. Too real. The day passed in a blur, and we returned home. As I tried to settle into some semblance of normalcy, my husband Steve noticed something else that made my blood run cold. There was blood on the sheets. Not a lot, but enough to leave a dark stain on the fabric. "Whatever happened," he said, his voice tight, "was when you were sleeping. It must been." His eyes flicked to me, and I could see the concern etched deep on his face. But there was something else there too, something I couldn't name. Fear. My fears were all gone as soon as I fell asleep. I woke up with a strange sensation of relief, as if the sleep I just had was liberating, like I was somehow freed from whatever had been suffocating me. I didn't even remember the wound anymore. It felt as though it never existed. "Are you feeling any better?" Steve asked, his voice gentle, almost hesitant. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile, though every inch of my body was screaming at me. I wasn't feeling better. I wasn't sure I would ever feel better again. Steve wasn't there. He had woken up earlier than me to go to work. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling almost brand new, as if I had been reborn overnight. I turned my body to position my feet on the floor, but when I went to stand up, crack. A terrifying, sickening sound, the kind you never forget. The floorboard splintered beneath me and I collapsed, the impact jarring my entire body. I looked down at my feet. It was gone. I couldn't comprehend it. I reached down, my hands trembling, trying to feel the phantom foot that should have been there. But all I touched was skin, soft skin, unnaturally cold, like a part of me had been removed in my sleep. My stomach twisted in disgust. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. A wave of cold panic flooded my chest. My fucking foot was missing. The spot where it should have been was just a raw, empty space. Some blood, no flesh, just a jagged, smooth stump where my foot used to be. How? I tried to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I glanced at the sheets, and my heart stopped. Something was there. Bones. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. The questions were consuming me, but there was only one truth I knew. Something was horribly wrong, and I wasn't in control of it. The stench of it all hit me, sharp and foul, and I couldn't stop my body from convulsing, the nausea rising in my throat. I backed away, stumbling over the remnants of my own body, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this real? I could feel my pulse racing in my throat, my mind spiraling into chaos. That didn't make sense. How could I have lost a foot overnight? Foot bones and blood. flesh missing, pieces torn away, as though something had violently stripped it from me while I lay unconscious. My own flesh. My own body. Tommy came inside the room, holding his bunny toy tightly in his small hands. His eyes met mine, and I swear for a brief moment, I saw something in them, something not quite right. It wasn't the innocent look of a child. No, it was colder. It was knowing. "It's nice to see you happy, Mommy," he said, his voice too calm, too knowing. He smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was unsettling. He stood there watching me, frozen in my fear, struggling to comprehend what was happening. His smile stretched wider, his eyes glinting in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. His words crawled under my skin like worms, and for a split second I couldn't breathe. Happy? How could he think I was happy? My foot was gone. I was bleeding. What the hell was he talking about? He stopped right in front of me, crouching down to my level. His fingers gripped the bunny toy tightly, his knuckles white with tension. He didn't flinch when his eyes dropped to the blood-stained sheets around me. I swear, he didn't even blink. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't even form a coherent sentence as I watched Tommy move slowly toward me. Every step he took seemed deliberate, as if he was savoring the moment, his gaze fixed on me. "You're okay, Mommy," he whispered so quietly I could barely hear him, but the words sank deep. "We just have to wait." Tommy tilted his head slightly, his smile still fixed in place. It was like he was studying me, waiting for me to react, but all I could do was stare, unable to move. Then he slowly placed the bunny toy on the bed beside me, but there was something wrong with it. The fabric, once soft and clean, was now darkened. It was stained with something that wasn't just dirt. It was soaked in blood, the edges of the fabric frayed as though something sharp had torn through it. I couldn't look away from it. I felt a sharp pang in my stomach. I felt the room close. I stared at myself. What I saw was beyond recognition. My skin was an unnatural mottled color, half decayed, with patches of blood and open sores that hadn't been there before. My body was no longer just a wound. It was a decaying living corpse. I couldn't even comprehend how far my flesh had rotted away. The wounds, they were more than just cuts. There were chunks missing, like pieces of me had been violently scraped off, leaving behind exposed yellowed muscle and bone. My face was unrecognizable. The once smooth skin now hung loosely, discolored and wrinkled, as if someone had tried to peel it off. I could smell the rot. I finally managed to compose myself, but my body felt like it was falling apart as I tried to stand. My left foot felt heavy, and I was only able to hobble on the other. With every step, the raw pain from my wounds sent jolts through my body. As I slowly made my way toward the mirror, I couldn't avoid the horror that was about to unfold. This time, I knew I needed more than just medical help. I needed answers. I had to call the police. I had to understand what had happened to me. But even as I dialed, the confusion set in deeper. How could I not have noticed any of this? How could I have missed the fact that my body was being consumed, piece by piece? There was no way this was normal. I couldn't trust myself. I was barely aware of time passing as I was transported to the hospital. My head was spinning and I felt like I was floating through everything, detached from reality. Then I saw him. Steve. He looked frantic, his face pale as he rushed to my side. I wanted to reach for him, but the pain was unbearable, and my body was giving up on me. The ambulance arrived, and the nurses were horrified. They wrapped my foot, but their expressions were blank, filled with disbelief. They kept asking the same question over and over, like they couldn't quite make sense of it. How had I lost my foot and not even realized it? The words echoed in my head, spinning. I must have been drugged, I muttered. But even as I said it, it felt like a lie. No one was buying it. Before I could speak, the police were swarming the room. They started questioning me, their eyes wary, but there was something else there. Confusion. Why was I still conscious? Why hadn't I noticed the damage being done to myself? The questions didn't stop. My thoughts were all over the place. I didn't know what was real anymore. But then something else happened. The police turned to Steve. Their tone changed. I heard the words "major suspect" and my mind spun. Suddenly they arrested him, right there in front of me. What the hell? I wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, but the words were trapped in my throat. I couldn't believe it. Steve would never. My heart raced as the truth slammed into me. My husband, arrested for cannibalism. Cannibalism. The word reverberated in my ears, and everything went cold. How could this be? My own husband, eating me alive. As they dragged him away, my mind raced. Something wasn't right. Why would they accuse him? Why now? I begged the officers to reconsider, but they wouldn't listen. They told me Steve was a threat, that he was dangerous, and they wouldn't release him until the investigation was over. They said it was for my own safety. I glanced at Tommy, who stood at the edge of the room. He was silent, his eyes empty, like he was in another world. It sent a chill down my spine. What if Tommy was somehow involved? He wasn't acting like my son anymore. He seemed different, out of control. Steve didn't do anything to me, I replied coldly. There was a venom in my voice that surprised even me. But it wasn't Steve. I knew that much. There was something else going on, something more sinister. My sister offered her house to me and Tommy, a place to stay after everything we'd been through. The air was thick with tension, and the silence between us was deafening. There were no long conversations, no gossiping, no laughter, not a single trace of happiness. My sister, who I once shared everything with, now looked at me with a mix of concern and fear. I could see it in her eyes, the way she tried to keep a distance from me, as if she could smell the decay on me, both physical and mental. I can't believe Steve did this to you. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling as she tried to comfort me. But the words hit me wrong. They didn't feel real. I stopped laughing when I realized the two academics, the two scientists, were quite serious. Firewolves of California. Wildfires start with a mere spark, just a little heat on dry kindling and the race is on. Professor Gregory iterated meaningfully. We all knew what they meant, but what they were talking about wasn't just the simple fact they had stated. You are both quite serious, I said quietly, hearing the surprise and awe in my voice. It just sounds so ridiculous. The closest pack to the latest wildfires is Yalamne, and they live all the way up in Tulare, and that's just our first logistical hurdle. You realize that they can only put out a small grass fire, and that's it. Anything bigger than that is beyond them. By the time the pack reaches any sparks, perhaps miles away, it will be a fire too big for them to handle. I tried to reason with them, but they shook their heads sadly at me, like I just wasn't getting it. Indeed, this is the solution we came up with, Dr. Pincher assured me. I thought for a long time as they stared at me. It was possible I'd seen dogs trained to put out small fires, but the animal invariably got burns for their efforts. Nature had made wolves terrified of fire for a good reason. They weren't equipped to handle it, or were they? Wolves teach their young, and when new packs are formed, old skills are retained. Our efforts will carry on, becoming a legacy. If they can stop even one catastrophic fire, what we do will be more than worth it, Dr. Pincher said, really believing in the cause. Actually, it isn't exactly so simple. We've already gone way above you on all that. Professor Gregor smiled weirdly, that California politician smile, the one that made me want to move back to Oregon where there are still good Christian Americans, and not whatever I'd say populates California. So you want my wolves? That's really why you are here. We've already worked out how you are going to condition them, and I bet you've even got something worked out with Fish and Wildlife about releasing my wolves back into the wild. You've got this whole thing all sorted out then. And all you need are the actual wolves. I sighed. I wasn't going to let the two quacks anywhere near my wolves. I see, I said, bitterness in my voice. Then I added, impulsive and angry, I can't wait to see you get mauled. These are orders from the concerned departments, legality of your operation, and the signature of the governor. Dr. Pincher slid a folder across the table to me. I flipped it open and saw that they were taking my wolves and my operation away from me, with or without my help in their plans. What do you mean? I stood, feeling a little angry. I already sensed they were about to seize my operation for their own insane plot. It only took 2 years before the results were satisfactory. I reminded myself I was forced to do this to my wolves, as a feeling of pride arose within me. The demonstration had a lot of department officials and government, and the governor was also there. A few small fires were started in the fire department's outdoor burn laboratory. My wolves were released, and with coordinated movement that rivaled a team of Navy SEALs, they went to work. I had worse enemies to hate, and my wolves hated them too. It is unnatural for a wolf to approach a fire. They nipped at me while I treated their burns, but they knew me and let me get close. Anyone else would have had to use sedatives to put ointment on a wolf's burned paw. They chuckled and made me sign that I was aware of their operation and intended to cooperate. In return for signing for the devil, my soul was granted access to my wolves as their caretaker during their upcoming training montage. Somehow that song, Holiday by Green Day became my personal anthem, even though I used to hate that kind of music, especially Green Day. Weird that their music got me through that very rough chapter in my life. We set up camp and prepared to release them. I planned to stay 2 nights in observation, documenting the release. Dr. Pincher and Professor Gregor were with me, as well as a few interns of theirs. When the fires were out, their singed paws from patting the flames, the dust all over their fur from digging and throwing dirt onto the flames, didn't bother them. They howled in unison, a different howl I'd never heard before, victorious and free. There was an applause. I felt lightheaded. As we drove them out to the national forest they would soon call home, a kind of melancholy fell over me. I felt depressed, depleted, and unfulfilled. My life choices had led me to that road, delivering wolves raised in captivity, used to feeding on delivered roadkill, to a place that hadn't had wolves in over 100 years. There wasn't a fire ban, but I would have cautioned everyone not to have a campfire that night. We had taught the wolves that putting out fires was a meet and greet for prey, and they had no fear of humans. I'd say they were also somehow resentful for being forced to put out numerous fires, and remembered all their painful burns. That is when I began to feel afraid. I'd never seen them in the wild, and as my prisoners, I treated them like guests. When the state showed up, the wolves became tools, firefighting tools. I'd never seen them as wild animals. No ordinary animals, however, but completely disenchanted by man and his fire, and aware of our weaknesses. While the interns built a campfire, I wasn't in camp. I was watching my wolves as they sniffed their new home. They hadn't gone far, and they were watching the humans while I watched them licking their lips. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.